Colleagues, we should make a start if you're good to go. Bonnie, where's Marianne? Marianne and Ann. Sorry, we're still missing a couple of people. We'll just start in a moment. They're refreshing themselves. There she is. She's refreshed. Where's Marianne?
They're refreshing.
She's also a refresher.
They're all refreshed.
Oh, Janet's not. I'm sorry. I called us to order prematurely.
Maybe explain to the public we've been here since 7:30.
No, we'll just have to wait a couple of minutes for the others to make it.
Explain that the chairman does not allow breaks.
Oh, man.
You showed me that, yeah. How are you gonna heat it up?
Did you leave refreshments?
You're like on your own right now? They're like a bachelor for a week and a half.
Where'd Paul go?
That's right.
Yeah, you did.
Paul, what happened to you?
I think it was the most rich one who ever had.
I do the exact same.
Well,
Did you do anything else besides that?
impoverished because you were riveting to it. They, yeah. How come this is on here?
Too many pockets.
Another letter? And this is about Davenport, which I've been very involved in as a group. Yeah, they wanted a tunnel, I knew that. However,
Not going to be a tunnel.
yeah, I know that, and I was one of the
Well, what's happening
people
to
that
him?
pushed, before you got here, they pushed, they didn't know what they were looking at, there was no design. I said, show me the design. Of course, when they came
Waiting
up
for
with this
Marianne
design, a lot of the
and
text.
Janet.
Oh, Janet, it was so ridiculous. They said, well, we are not ready to show them yet, we just want, I said, we can't say, here's what we're gonna do, we're not gonna give you a
Well, I
tunnel.
did read that article.
And then what they were showing them, constituents, was a big box blocking all the windows.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah,
For obvious reasons. Are we really short?
yeah,
I don't know. I think we're fine.
yeah, so you see how it's all.
The men's is like a ballroom, right? It's huge. You could turn it into a board meeting.
I have walked in
Marianne,
there once.
Janet, we're waiting for you guys. Thanks. Colleagues, welcome. Thank you very much for coming. Call the meeting to order. Rose Patton, unfortunately, is not with us this morning on the board because she was hit by a bug late in the middle of the night. So she said her regrets. She was with us for committees yesterday. But Bonnie Patterson will step in and replace Rose as chairing HR today. And Howard Shearer is not with us today because he's in Jamaica celebrating his mother's 90th birthday today in Jamaica. And so he, as a good son, is where he should be with his mother there. It's a special honor today for the board of Metrolinx to welcome back Paul Bedford. Paul, take a bow, Paul. Paul was a...
I'm here for moral support.
Paul was a founding director of the modern Metrolinx. He was a director of the previous version of Metrolinx. And he, of course, has been a major figure in shaping this region and this organization for a very long time. And it's wonderful to have you back here, Paul. Thank you for being here. We don't take deputations, but we take interventions from you for sure, in your honorary status. Sitting beside me on my right is Robert Siddle. Robert is the acting president of Metrolinx, serving from September 1st to the end of September, and we're very grateful to Robert. He's normally chief financial officer of Metrolinx, but today and for this month is helping us out, serving as acting president. And I might say doing a terrific job based on the first couple of weeks of our working together on essentially a daily basis. So Robert, thank you for stepping up to serve. On October the 1st, our new CEO, who we introduced in late August, Phil Verster, will be joining us and taking office on October 1st, and Robert will revert to being Chief Financial Officer on October 1st. In terms of correspondence, there's a package of correspondence we've received, and as you just pointed at me something. Is that not it?
This is the most recent.
No, I'm sorry. As always, I'll take you through the correspondence we have received, and indeed in one case we have sent. We have on the table correspondence from Minister Del Duca concerning Kirby and Lawrence East, and I've tabled also the response that I sent to the minister on behalf of the board. I might say that that correspondence commits us to doing a thorough review of the Kirby and Lawrence East station decisions and to report back to this board not later than the February board meeting. We've asked management to drive that process. The process is underway. I've spoken with the Mayor of Toronto, John Tory, and the Mayor of the City of Vaughan, Mr. Bellavacqua, and asked them to prepare comprehensive submissions updating their plans around each of these stations and their views on these matters, and they're both more than happy to do so. They're strong supporters of the stations in their respective cities, so we'll gather that information and then do a comprehensive update of our analysis, our thinking, and report back in February. There's also correspondence from the regional chair and CEO for Durham, Mr. Roger Anderson, who provided some very constructive and detailed comments on our business plan, which when there's an acknowledgement of that letter. I also met with Mr. Anderson to discuss a number of these matters, and I told him how grateful we were when he takes the trouble to give us such detailed and thoughtful comments on our work. There's email from Mr. Murray Lumley endorsing the work of Royce and James of the Toronto Star, and a reply to him. There's correspondence from Kevin Montgomery and Chris Drew, co-founders of Fight Gridlock in Brampton, dated September 14, regarding the Kitchener Corridor electrification, expansion, electrification, off-peak GO service, and the freight bypass. There's email correspondence from Justin Davis requesting the issuance of a monthly printed TTC Presto Pass, the elimination of the Presto card issuance fee, and the implementation of Presto fare gates at the Heath Street entrance on St. Clair West TTC station. I might say that's my station too, so I've endorsed Mr. Davis's submissions. And then there's correspondence from Laura Zeglin, dated September 14, regarding the Davenport Diamond Overpass, and all that correspondence will be posted on our website for those that would like to read it, subject to the authors being prepared to having it posted. That's correspondence. That, I believe, brings us to the CEO's report. CEO.
I just want to bring something to your attention. The problem is that there's not a lot of public input into the, there's a lot of there's spaces at the table. There's in fact not a lot of public input. So, and it's interesting that,
Would you care to introduce yourself?
1 second, just unwrapping this. It's well wrapped. It's a present for you.
Thank you very much.
It's a pink slip for all of you.
Thank you.
And it's to the board
Promise?
of Metrolinx. Because you are serving politicians in the private sector. You're not serving the public. So, and you're making decisions not based on evidence. You're not based on what's good for the public. You're making evidence based on what the politicians want and what's good for the private sector through these public-private partnerships, which are giving huge amounts of money, and you know it, to the private sector with very little proper public oversight. So we want you all gone now because it's a disgrace that everybody is here. And there's not even a single real transit expert on the panel, on the board. And yet this is a transit board. It's a disgrace. So we need a new board that has mostly comprised of independent transit experts and representatives of the regions that you're serving. We demand that now in place for the next board meeting. And we also need to get, there's a huge cultural secrecy. There's a 2+ hour secret meeting, completely compliant behind closed doors. We dealt with important financial matters. None of that is open to the public. The public's not allowed to depute at meetings. We should be opportunities for the public to come and ask questions and have their questions answered. All contracts should be public. All the negotiations and the contract should be, we're paying for it. We, the public, are paying for it. And yet we don't get to see any of it. And you're spending, you've already, as is in the page 181 of the draft regional transportation plan, says, okay, you've spent 30 billion, you're going to spend another 45 billion. If that doesn't even include, as you said, it doesn't include the financing or the maintenance and operation. That can easily double the cost. There's the interest and debt payments that can easily put this government, this province underwater. So we need, everything's got to be open. And we also need to make sure that the public-private partnerships end. You call it AFP, alternative financing and procurement. It's privatization. So that has to end.
Thank you very much. Do you mind just introducing yourselves, just so we know who you are?
Oh, we don't need to.
Okay.
that's-
Thanks very much.
We're not done yet, no.
No,
Mine, I'm Murray Lumley. I wrote you the letter
Right.
asking you to resign.
thanks very much.
Yeah, so and it's interesting you said that, who are you asking to do the review of the stations of the Kirby and Lawrence East? You're asking Mayor John Tory, and of course that's his baby. The Lawrence East subway station, Smart Track station is his baby. Do you think he's gonna come back saying, no, I don't approve it? And you already have done an analysis, and now you think this analysis, which showed that it's not, doesn't make sense. You think this analysis, you're just pandering to what the Liberal MPP and Transportation Minister Stephen Del Duca wants.
Thank you very much for your comments, and we'll continue with the meeting.
We're not leaving.
Yes, you don't have to leave. I didn't ask you to leave. I just said we're going to continue the meeting. I'm calling on the CEO to make his report. Go ahead, please, Robert.
Okay,
Living this to you,
Yeah, we all have to look.
Thanks very much.
thank you.
you're being fired, all of you.
Would we be so lucky?
Go ahead, Robert.
I'd like to start with three thank yous. One to the board for giving me the opportunity to serve this great company. Two, to all the staff of Metrolinx. It is their wisdom and passion that truly leads this corporation, not me. And third, to Phil Verster, who has agreed to join this corporation, who over the last 2 weeks I've got to know, and he is a great leader, and we are lucky to have him coming on board to this corporation. We have at this meeting today the opportunity to present to you a plan for this region to take us to the year 2014. The purpose of putting this plan forward is, 2041. Sorry, I'm getting my numbers wrong. That's not good as a CFO. And the purpose of putting this plan forward today is to get public comment. I encourage every citizen of this region to read the report, to tell us what we have right, to tell us what we've got wrong, and to tell us what we can do better. We have set aside 3 months to hear from all of you, and we are looking forward to being able to respond to what you tell us. Let's get on with the work, please.
Anything else?
Nope.
Any questions to Robert? Let's get to work. The first resolution, which I will move, is to approve the appointment of 2 officers, Tom Budd as Vice President Network Infrastructure and Daryl Brown, Vice President Operations. Bonnie, you'll second that as Acting Chair of the HR Committee. Any questions about those 2 officer appointments? That's done, and as you know, in August, we appointed Phil Verster as President and CEO. That brings us to item number 9 on the agenda, Presto Update. Robert Hollis, please. Take it away, Robert. And Peter, you're on deck, so why don't you come up and get ready so we don't have to keep people waiting in between presentations.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm pleased to be here to talk about progress on Presto. First up is our Shoppers Drug Mart partnership. The field trials went very successfully over the spring. In late August, we started rolling out across Toronto. We have 38 stores up and running. And what you can do in those stores is you can buy a card, you can load a card, you can set a seniors concession, and as of August, you can actually set your TTC monthly pass. So we're going to continue to roll out across Toronto, working with TTC and Shoppers Drug Mart to get this network fully rolled out. We're also in negotiation with municipalities in 905 and Ottawa to look at expanding the Shoppers Drug Mart arrangement throughout those areas. On to TTC. The volumes continue to grow. There's always a bit of a lull in the summer. We expect an uptick now that the fall's here, but we are progressing volume increases. The work that's underway right now is to return to the 26 subway stations that have the old turnstiles with Presto readers to add in TTC's new modern fare gate. So that work will be underway over the next several months. And once that's done, that will complete the rollout of all of the fare collection equipment across all of the TTC vehicles and stations. Also for TTC, we have new functionality coming in now and in the fall to add more and more of the TTC unique needs to the table. There'll be more pass products. Passes began to be sold in June timeframe. There'll be more pass products coming in the fall, working in conjunction with TTC to gradually roll these out in a phased manner. We're also in market right now. There's an educational campaign that will help folks in Toronto understand what Presto can do and where you can get cards and actually start using the system. As of this point now, you can get cards via the web. You can get it at gateway stores and subway stations. You can now get it at Shoppers Drug Mart, and of course, you can still get it in 905 and Go Transit through their sales agents. The reader stability issues have been resolved. We had a number of teething problems late last year and early in New Year as we rolled out 5,000 devices. But on the vehicles and the subway stations at the old turnstiles, the availability as well, high into the 90s. We're still working on getting that to our target of always over 99%. We are seeing increased volume of the TTC with over 1.5 million taps a week. Coming forward in December is the opening of the Toronto-York subway station extension. And in those stations, we'll be adding in new self-serve kiosks that will actually sell cards and load cards and take cash so that patrons will be able to get cards when they go into stations. And those devices will be rolled out through all of the other stations throughout next year as well. There's also new functionality coming, for instance, things like the express bus and other functionality in different types of pass products in the fall. So we're in the middle of the rollout, and we're still continuing to progress at adding features and functions and capabilities around the system. In terms of the GTHA, we now have functionality available. The second part comes in the fall to allow university passes. So universities around GTHA and other jurisdictions, there's special pass products that they can have. They'll be available. Go Transit's been retrofitting their ticket vending machines to add Presto card sales and card loads, and those will be rolling out, over the next few months. The other highlight, I would say, in August, Presto has achieved hitting a 3 million target for active cards. So we sell about 15 to 20,000 cards a week, and that growth we will see continuing as we roll out on the TTC. At this point, we do about 25 million boardings a month, and that number we expect to grow considerably as more and more of the TTC patrons adopt Presto. So lots of numbers there. They're all in the positive direction. It's looking good. We're on plan from our point of view to continue the rollout in the TTC. Number of upgrades, as I mentioned, coming in the fall. We expect to have all of the TTC key functionality available by the end of the year and early next year. The last big announcement I'd like to make is we've been in negotiation with Ottawa, the GTHA, and Go Transit at the end of their current 10-year agreement to move them into a new 10-year agreement. And I'm pleased to say we have a tentative agreement on the business terms with those agencies, and we're looking forward to having the contract signed for the next decade by the end of this year. My last point is back in June, we initiated a review of our policies, Metrolinx's policies, and particularly Presto, around the privacy of the information that we hold and how that information is used. And I have Alba Taylor here from Legal who can update the committee on the progress of that exercise.
Good morning. Thanks, Robert. As Robert's mentioned, we committed in June to review our practices with respect to disclosing Presto information to law enforcement. That work is underway. We've reached out to some of our counterparts in the transit industry and have also reviewed the privacy practices and policies of the telcos, the telecommunication companies, and some of the banks. to see what we could learn from those different industries. We've also been working with our colleagues in communications and stakeholder relations to set up a consultation plan and prepare a consultation document. We want to hear from the public and what they think of our practices and policies in this respect. As you know, privacy is often a balancing act. In this case, on a public transit system, it's a balance between protecting private personal information and protecting safety and security of the public transit system. We are also working with the Information and Privacy Commissioner to make sure that we're communicating clearly and getting the right input. With that in mind, we intend to go through Metrolinx Engage, which is our digital communication platform, to seek that public input later this month. We'll be asking for input on potential changes for how we respond to law enforcement requests, how we communicate our policy in this respect, and how we report on these kinds of activities. We are also engaging, just flip the switch there, we'd like to engage with some of the experts in this field, and to that end, we're planning a focused stakeholder session. We'll be inviting academics, privacy experts, law enforcement, and also transit agency representatives to speak to that issue, and this will be a third-party facilitated session. After that, we will report back to the board, seek the input of the board, and report back to the ICC.
Thank you, Alba. And are you finished, Robert?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Questions, comments, anything to Robert or Alba or both? Rahul?
Yep, two questions. Great to see the progress, Rob. Two questions. One is the reader reliability is trending really well. How about on the reload machines themselves? Because I've even noticed personally from time to time, if the card works great, if it's fully loaded, getting it loaded has been a bit of an issue. Any commentary around how that's coming along?
Yeah, great question. The first version of the reload machines, the 75 we put out earlier in the year, have not met our reliability requirements. So we have fenced those in, and we've made several improvements with the vendor to make them reasonably operable, but they're not at the 99th percentile rate. Now, those machines are very heavily used. We see the volumes continue to rise, or up to 55,000 transactions a week. But in essence, what I would say is we are hand-holding those machines to keep them viable. In our labs and now in field testing is the next generation of that machine, which is significantly new and improved. The entire internals of that machine have been changed. And the really unique piece of that machine is it'll have a direct connection into Monaris for credit card processing. So we expect really high availability of those machines. Once they're finished field testing, we will start deploying those in other TTC stations, and we will replace the current machines. So I would ask our customers if they could persevere for the next few months on those machines. We try to keep them up and available, but they will be replaced with new modern machines within the next few months.
Couple of months then? They're going online?
It'd be a few more months. We're thinking at the beginning we need to move some new machines into some new subway stations like the Toronto York subway area. So it'll be a combination of new locations and retrofitting. So we haven't worked out the exact plan on when all of the 75 will go. We are keeping them reasonably stable at this point in time, but we also have the need to expand at the same. So it'll be a combination. I would say early next year would be a target to have removed the rest of those original machines.
Quick follow-up question then. We've been talking about this one for years. It's my big interest, but the long-term game plan here on the open payment system so people can start tapping their credit cards. What you're thinking about when that's going to start?
Well, that's always been in our game plan, and it is a requirement of the TTC contract. But I would say at this point, our resources and capacity are fully consumed on getting the TTC rollout fully engaged. So open payment is very interesting and exciting, but it is priority 2 for us. We're hoping mid next year to have a first pilot out on open payment. We have some challenges around equipment in the open payment world. The standards continue to get tougher and tougher. The so-called EMV standards and PCI standards, the bar keeps rising. So we have work to do with our vendors on the readers to actually ensure those devices are meeting the latest standards. So we might have some work to do to actually bring those readers up to standard. It's a moving target. Every year these standards get tougher and tougher because of fraud and other issues that happen around the world. So the combination of we can introduce the software, but we also have to make sure that our devices are compliant in the industry. I would say mid next year would be a good target for a first pilot.
So just to say publicly then that this is still a part of the game plan.
Oh, it's always been on our list, but again, we are focused on our game one is to get TTC fully rolled out, fully enabled with all the features, and so we can get our adoption rate up and we can get everyone in Toronto riding by Presto.
Thank you, Marianne.
Can you comment, Robert, on the cost of the replacement of these machines? My personal subway station has been renovated and now is being renovated again to accommodate them. How does that work from a contractual perspective with the supplier of the?
So specifically the 75 self-service reload machines?
Are you talking about the turnstiles, or are you
I'm talking about the turnstiles.
turnstiles? I think is.
Okay, so on the turnstiles, the 43 stations that have already been fully enabled with TTC's new modern fare gates are done, and now we're moving down, primarily downtown, to the original 26 stations that put in TTC's new fare gates. So our obligation in the contract was to put a reader on front of old turnstiles. TTC secured the funding to buy brand new fare gates. Those fare gates are owned and operated by TTC. So we do the civil works in the station to get ready, put all the communications and infrastructure in place, and then TTC installs and then manages the fare gates. I don't know if that gets to your question or not.
And it's TTC pays for the
TTC
for the
fully,
turnstile, the fare gates.
Yeah, TTC fully funds the capital and operating for the fare
Metrolinx
gates.
paid for the first ones and TTC pays for the next level?
Right, so the readers that we're taking out now, that was our obligation in the initial contract to run those,
The
but
future is happening more quickly.
yes.
Yeah.
And it's actually, it's a good thing. I'm really pleased TTC were able to get the funding because it really helps modernize the stations to put in new gates. The old turnstiles and readers were compromised. They were somewhat slow. I think and these devices will have the future proofing that the old style wouldn't have had. So it's a good news story for the future.
Bonnie?
So,
Robert, I just had a question, it won't surprise you, about the university pass.
Yes.
So do I take it that this fall at some point, across the entire system, the UPass will apply, be put in place? You've given an interim example of McMaster and the Hamilton area with McMaster University and Redeemer. But can you just give me a little more flavor on this with several 100,000 now students in the GTA, how this is playing itself out?
Yes, great question. So for some time now, our 905 and Ottawa partners have wanted a specialized program for UPass. So that functionality is coming in the fall. Hamilton wanted to start the program this fall. So what we did is a one-off, we had handheld produced cards, through a one-off process to get them cards to do this pilot in Hamilton. So we're working with them very closely to get this program run out. But as you point out, there are hundreds of thousands of students. So the way this will work is we're providing the functionality for agencies and their universities to take their deals, whatever their deals are on the transit discount, and utilize our facility to order the cards and load the cards with the passes. So we're actually enabling those programs, but the actual programs and the contracts to do this are between the agencies and the universities and colleges. And all of our agencies are very keen on this, including the ones in Ottawa. So it'll be a timing issue. The functionality will be available in the fall. When a university and an agency wants to start the program may depend on their semesters. So we are working with them. It'll probably be next year before we start lining up how these programs get rolled out, whether that's a spring semester or whether it's the next fall semester, but it'll all be available by the end of this year to start the process.
But it's a university or college-specific initiative in each case.
Exactly. So
It's not a system, it's not a university and college system
no,
initiative.
they're unique deals between the agencies and the universities or colleges in their jurisdiction. They work out their financial arrangements, their discounts, whatever it is they do in their business model. Our job is to facilitate the loading of the cards and the setting of the passes and the distribution to provide the facility.
So the who's I forget what your language was, qualified student happens at the university level or college level. And
Exactly.
then once they have their pass, they're able to use the normative systems to load, add value, et cetera.
Exactly. So I would say that every one of those deals will be custom to that agency and that college. Our job is to facilitate all of the processes you would need on Presto to get those cards out, enabled, and utilized on their system.
Thank you.
Alba, I was pleased by the thoroughness of your report and the process you're following. I wasn't sure at the end what the last slide meant. It said you'll come back to us in December, and then you'll report back to the IPC. Do you view the IPC as the final determinant of where this policy balance is found, or do you view this board as the place where the final balance point between security, privacy, all the things you've listed, I'd always assumed, as long as it was consistent with Ontario law, it was this board that would make the final decision. This reads as though you think the board will have a shot at it, but then it's up to the IPC to sign off or not sign off.
No, I think you're right. I think provided it complies with the law, the board has the final decision-making authority, but we will be working with the IPC to get a sense of any of the issues or concerns with the policy. But ultimately, our privacy practices, provided they comply with the law, are within the discretion of Metrolinx.
And right now, our policy complies with the law, correct?
Yes, it does, and the IPC has also affirmed that.
Right, so it complies with the law now, and you'll make sure that any revisions would still comply.
Yes.
But so I would view that, and I don't mean it in too hierarchical a sense, but I think the IPC should be a resource to your guiding the board. So when you bring a policy to the board in December, you know it's IPC compliant, if you will, as it's within the range of things that the IPC can sign off on, rather than imagine the board will do it and then you go to get it reviewed. I'd rather you get it reviewed along the way.
Understood.
Because the IPC can be a valuable resource to us. In the end, I think it's actually judgment calls as to where that balance, as you know, I happen to be on the side of privacy more than on security. Others I know on this board, Bill Fish is the other side of that debate, and you know, I think there's a real judgment to be made.
Agreed.
That's our judgment, though, right?
Yes.
In the end, on your advice.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that nuance.
We still get another kick of the can, Bill.
Oh, then.
Anything else on Presto? Thank you very much, both of you. Excellent. Next up is capital projects update. The presentation is by Peter Zuck, the Chief Capital Officer of Metrolinx, now in his 9th week?
I think so.
9th week. And based on my interactions with Peter, which have been intensive over the past 9 weeks, doing one terrific job. You're a great addition to the team. You bring great experience in the US and the UK to bear, and we're benefiting from it already. So over to you, Peter, but thanks for casting your lot.
Well, Chair and members, thank you for having me. And I think you know I've spent the better part of the last 25 years as a public employee working on public projects and working for people who use those public projects. So in my first 9 weeks, I've had a chance to...
And you're a Canadian.
And I'm a Canadian. And I've had a chance to see close up just how much the province and this agency are trying to do for our citizens. And as the first slide shows, we have a reason for doing that. The region is growing. Over the next, by 2041, we'll have 30% more people. That requires a different solution for those that want to use public transportation. So what are we doing to invest for our future needs? I find this slide striking. If we take a look at what assets we have today at about $20 billion, over the next 10 years, we will be adding to our assets $43 billion, meaning to me that 70% of this entire system is going to be a new system built in the next 10 years. And that is a massive investment in public transportation. I'll pause for just a minute on this slide to let you know that I know what you're trying to accomplish, because I know you all know it better than me. First of all, we're taking something which is generally peak hour service and making it 15-minute service. That's the center of this slide. Increasing by 300% trips to 6,000 per week, resulting in, instead of peak service at 15 minutes or better. And the balance of this slide tells you those things that are required to make that happen. 52 new train sets, 150 kilometers of new track, 32 new GO stations, 45 bridge upgrades. Of course, we're adding to the system extensions to Kitchener, Niagara, and Bowmanville. We're adding new light rail stops and stations, 16 stations and 65 stops, and 64 kilometers of new light rail track in addition to our rapid transit, in addition to commuter rail track. This is a massive undertaking. But progress is being made. We are well into our 10-year delivery program. In terms of the numbers, we have $3 billion committed to contracts, which by the end of 2018, 2019 will be $6 billion committed to contracts. We're continuing to advance rapid transit with Eglinton Crosstown scheduled for completion in 2021. And the Regional Express Rail, of course, our completion date is 2025. In this period, significant milestones achieved was we progressed our RFQ for a new operator, as well as issuing an RFQ for early stations improvements during the month of July. In rapid transit, the Renforth Terminal for GO and Mississauga My-Way buses is slated to open in September 2017. The Huron-Ontario Light Rail RFP was released in August of 2017. Eglinton Crosstown LRT, we continue to prepare for track and tunnel installation, and the first tracks were installed at Mount Dennis Maintenance Storage Facility. In terms of the GO expansion program, in the round, I gave you those numbers. The significant program elements that are included in that include our work on hydrogen as a technology. We are progressing the program with the thought that we are going to use existing technologies on the system. But at the same time, we are looking at hydrogen as a potential technology, either for RER or for future transportation needs of the agency. We're taking a fresh look at Union Station. We are working on the extensions as stated. We're in the midst of environmental assessments, and we are progressing the design of smart track stations with the City of Toronto. A moment on hydrogen. Why are we doing this? Well, if they asked that question at the time when we had horses and buggies, we would all be in horses and buggies and not on diesel trains. We plan to be on electric trains. The question presented, and a very astute one, I think, is whether or not hydrogen technology can be adapted for these electric trains. There's one example in the world where a government like Ontario has kind of taken this from a big picture view, and that's in Germany, where as a part of their environmental policies and their responses, they looked at hydrogen and progressed it. The first place they have progressed it is in transportation, and that's essentially what we're doing here. As we build this massive program, at the same time, we're taking a look at this, inviting industry experts to a consortium, to a meeting here in Toronto in November, and we will be able to report back to this board on the feasibility of this technology and what it might mean to us in terms of our current or future programs.
When are you going to report back?
The symposium is scheduled for November. We expect that towards the end of this year, early part of next year, the feasibility study will be available for your review.
Thank you.
Union Station, with planning and policy, you know we are looking at Union Station in a new way because we have the opportunity to. We have significant work going on in Union Station now for current service. We will be expanding its capacity to handle trains as part of GO service. That provides us the opportunity to take a fresh look at what we need to, what our opportunities are at Union Station beyond Regional Express Rail and to the planning period of 2041. Example of the kind of stations work we're doing is this new Oshawa GO via station, which is nearing completion and will be opened this fall. We continue to progress our environmental assessment programs. I'll pause for one moment about noise mitigation. A big piece of what we need to do, what we're going to be required to do, and what we want to do on the expansion of GO Rail is a noise mitigation program. To some people, that means sound barriers. To me, that means us thinking what it is that we can do, whether it is some type of a landscape architecture approach or some other technological approach, but to do a smart and a well thought out program of mitigating the impacts of our construction as well as operational activities on our customers. Smart track stations. In parallel with our process, the city is doing their participation in the design of these stations. We have a stage gate process. They have a stage gate process, which provides them an opportunity to review their progress. The approval of Stage Gate 4 process is expected to be debated at the Toronto City Council this fall, and the council is expected to consider final approval of their part of the program in the spring of 2018. Back to the beginning, this is all about the community. Mr. Chairman, I had an opportunity to go to Durham and to meet with the chair of the Durham Council and to hear from all of those communities in Durham. And part of my activities over the next period will be to get out to the community as best I can and talk to the people who we're delivering service to and tell them it's on the way and that we want it to be something that they will be proud of. So thank you for having me, and thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you. Man, there's a lot going on. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're open to questions. A lot of information there. Carl and then Rahul.
Yeah, I have one question, and it relates to the information you gave about Union Station. There
Yes.
are a lot of things happening there now, as we know. Can you expand a little bit on how, as we go into the regional transportation plan and the expansion to 2041, how the changes that are being made today and will be between now and 2025, as an example, to avoid redundant expansion plans?
Right. So we're not just taking the charter of building GO to 2025 as the end of the story at Union Station because it's such an important part of our system. So we're doing what we call future-proofing of our solutions there, taking a planning horizon nominally of 2041, but probably beyond that, to answer the question what Union Station, from a standpoint of moving trains, can accommodate, both in terms of our service and the service of other users, largely via rail, and making sure that we build the infrastructure as part of RER that will accommodate that. That appears to be going to be a plan which results in, ironically, fewer tracks, wider platforms, but better opportunities to move people through the station. While we're doing that, it makes sense to look at who owns what in Union Station. And as I've looked at this issue, I have to go ask the lawyers first because I understand that in the capital programs group, they think it's taken 2 years to find out who has pieces of Union Station. And understanding that and being able to show it is an important part of me learning and hopefully assisting to explain or to show you kind of what is at Union Station. There are lots of stakeholders there. There's us, there's the city, there's Via Rail, and literally there are pieces of it that we all have interests in. So that effort that is being led by our planning and policy group and working with my group will be to ask the question, what's possible here? We know we can move trains through essentially through 2041. We know that after that, we need to look at some of the other capital programs that are on our planning horizon. And we know that we can make it better because I'm a daily user of Union Station, and I think that, I need to make it my business to do a better job, like right now, for our customers.
Thank you. Keep going, Carl.
Just follow up
No,
on that.
absolutely.
So, as a person who doesn't have that detailed knowledge of Union Station in
Right.
ownership, it seems that should be a fairly simple thing to figure out.
That's what a guy from Kitchener would say.
Well, I could say something different. I'll restrain myself.
Don't respond.
The question is, when can you report back on that? Because I think it's obviously ideal and necessary to know that in the upfront planning process.
There is a plan for us to report back to you in December on Union Station. So, and I don't want to oversell answering all of the questions, but I think we'll have a much better idea and be able to convey a much better idea at that time. And I'm hoping to get, I want to have a BIM model so that we can actually show a picture of what the station looks like. And doing that will have great value because it'll help us design what we want to do, and it'll also get us all oriented at Union Station once and for all, so that as we build the system, we'll all know what's at Union Station.
That's what I was hoping you'd say.
Right.
I have Rahul and Mary Ann.
Carl went exactly where I was going, which was to Union Station, and you touched on elements of my question, but just help build it out a little bit. I mean, it's a beautiful building,
Right.
an extremely important symbol of progress.
Yes.
Going to be a hub functionally, et cetera. This fresh look that you're going to take on it, how does that impact the customer experience? I mean, when you get it to where we want it to be, compared to where it is now, what would the customer be experiencing differently? Because right now, it's not as pleasant an experience as it should be.
Well, I think, so go to the first piece, what the customer is experiencing now. We need to do better, and we need to do better with our partner, the City of Toronto, on how construction activity is conducted at Union Station, because it's hard for me to be proud of what we see there now and what we ask people to tolerate as we're going through. So that's one piece of this, is talking to them about that, the build phase of this. In terms of the completed phase of this, obviously wider platforms would be a huge improvement. Access to those platforms right now is constrained and is confined to stairways, and stairways that are not necessarily very pleasant experiences. So the notion would be, what can we do about moving people through the station, which is going to make this to be a better experience? Because there's some parts of Union Station that are really nice to walk through, and there are other parts of Union Station where it's kind of a march of a lot of people in unpleasant circumstances.
So do you anticipate that that's a deviation from our current plan? Like, do we have to change plans to get there, or is this just get that timetable going and make it happen?
We have to get the timetable going, make it happen, and do better at part of the construction activity is doing the construction activity in a way which conveys some confidence to our stakeholders that we know what we're doing and that we're building, but also allowing them to have a customer experience which is acceptable while we're doing it. And as I said, on our work, I'm going to be working very hard to make sure that where Metrolinx work is identified, that you'll see it and you'll know that we're accountable for giving the public a positive impression of what we're doing there with hoardings, messaging, and working with the operations staff in terms of their activities, working people around construction. The other part is working with other stakeholders at Union Station to have them join in that effort.
Marianne.
So thank you, Peter. And Union Station is, I think, just an incredibly important case study for Metrolinx moving forward. I think just in terms of the fresh look, I think, you have brought a fresh perspective to looking at Union Station. I think what we've received at the customer experience is your assessment of the challenges that happen there today. I think the next step, before there are design solutions, is to understand what the capacity of this station needs to be, and then to test it against design solutions. Like, when I first joined the board 5 years ago, and as a newcomer, I looked at that diagram and saw everything kind of combing back to all the 7 routes, comb back to that one location. And I think at a certain point, Union Station will have, exceeded the capacity. It just can't take any more. And so I think part of the solution is how do we diffuse some of that traffic? And I know that's part of the larger planning issue. But I think it is important to say, in this iteration, it can absorb this much, and actually to look to see how can we increase the capacity. And I suggested to you, sometime kind of an ideas competition that might, once we decide what we need, what RER as a game-changing, fantastic initiative, throwing a lot of money at the increased capacity, are we doing the right thing from a design planning perspective, city building, as well as customer service? So I think it's a very interesting problem, and I would encourage us to, because we have work ongoing there, which, the new thinking, the RER will disrupt some of that going forward. I think it really needs a pretty three-dimensional, 360 review, and I know you're onto it. I just think that it is something that the board and our committee should continue to really focus on.
Leslie, do you want to come to the table too and just say where between you and Peter this lies in terms of looking at the longer term capacity and its intersection with RER and related matters?
So first to say, there is very little space between Peter and I in this combined effort. We understand it's an iterative exercise insofar as we want to be able to be looking well ahead from a long-term planning perspective, but at the same time, it continues to be a functioning station, and we have construction underway, and we need to keep moving forward. So I would say that they are parallel and reciprocating efforts at the 2 different timescales, and we hope to report back at it in a bit more detail in December on that.
And I can hear Leslie's phone calls.
Yeah,
Gee, you hear mine because our offices are
we
next to each other.
eavesdrop on each other's conversations.
It's a really complicated, I mean, thank you for taking on this, again, taking on, because I know the solutions of the past are not the solutions of the future, because the game has changed. And I think, Peter, one of your first slides, just, the enormity of what's happening and how it will transform our region. And a lot of it just comes down to Union Station as well. So diffusing that is such an important part of planning and policy and what they're looking at. So, thank you.
Any more questions to Peter on his report? Thanks, Peter.
Thank you
It's
very
really good
much.
having you
Cheers.
leading the team. That brings us to the next item, which is the next RTP, Regional Transportation Plan, draft plan for public consultation. Leslie and her team are going to present this. We're going to start with a film and set it out. So there'll be a video, and then there'll be a presentation, and then we'll have a discussion. Leslie, let me say at the beginning a couple of things. One, what's in front of us here is management's best advice with respect to a draft to take to the public.
Correct.
The board will comment on it today. We may ask you to make some changes. We may not ask you to make changes in this draft. We'd expect you to make those changes very quickly and then publish a consultation draft of this report. So I'd expect we'll have the formal consultation draft of the report on the street within 2 weeks, let's say. We expect this to be a fast turnaround after today. And that will be the formal consultation document. We will consult broadly, a whole lot of processes. Leslie will speak a bit to that. And it will be an opportunity to get feedback. It'll then come back to the board at the end of this calendar year with management's recommendation as to a final plan based on the consultations, the feedback, the input we get, the interaction with stakeholders over the next 3 months. We'll take that into account, and then the final regional transportation plan will be approved by the board at that point. So this next 90 days is a very important opportunity to shape the future of the region. It's our effort to take all the learning we've done, all the consulting we've done to date, all the inputs from all the municipalities, which are rolled into this draft, and now to invite people to make this draft better, to challenge the pieces that aren't right, to add pieces where we need to go further, to take ideas and run them more to ground, to do whatever we can do to make this a worthy successor to the big move of 2008. This is to be the big move of 2018 when we finalize it at the end of this year. And so this is our effort to engage the community broadly in the work we're doing. We do think fundamentally this planning document is the most important thing we do, is getting the framework right within which all the multiple activities of ourselves and all of our partners and all the municipal transit agencies that we're all working together under a broad plan. Getting this plan right we view as critically important, and that's why this process in 2 steps, formal consultation draft on the street within 2 weeks, come back here in December with all the responses we receive, and come back with a final plan. With that, Leslie, to you and your team, you've done a ton of work to get us to this stage. You've had the residents panel, you've had others working with you. Thank you to all of you, and it's over to you. Leslie Wu.
Thank you, and I'm actually just going to go right into the video.
We dim the lights.
Can we dim the lights?
So I grew up in a small village in the northern coast of Trinidad. There were maybe 300 people maximum in the village. I've traveled quite a bit. I've seen poverty. I've seen suffering. And we're very, very, very fortunate to live in a country where we have a lot of opportunities.
As a kid, I lived in the apartments and I ran around with my neighbors, just played in the park nearby. We were playing hockey in the wintertime, soccer in summer. The greatest part about the city is the Blue Jays. I love going downtown to watch games. I just love the atmosphere downtown.
When I was a little girl, Toronto was like vanilla pudding and white bread. We didn't have 1 million people in Toronto back then. Okay, we didn't have the diversity at all that we've got now. Yes. I have 2 dogs, very active little things, and I have to get them to the vet on a regular basis. Try your best. Yeah. And when I first started working, I started taking the GO train, and then I retired. I drive now. I've been out of downtown for 9 years, and they changed it a whole lot when I was not looking.
So I go to Schulich, which is a pretty long commute. I love my commute because I get to read on the train. I don't have to worry about the roads or other drivers. I just sit there, read, think, do whatever.
Well, my immediate community is my neighbors, of course. We live in a condominium of 27 homes, great neighbors. Many of them have been here from the time we moved in, which is almost 18 years ago. I love Oakville. It's a wonderful community. When you decide you want to move in a particular direction, you often recognize opportunities that come your way that would lead you in the direction you want to go. And you normally would not have seen those opportunities. So I was going through the mail one day and I saw the envelope from Metrolinx and I looked at it and I thought, hey, this is an opportunity here.
So we recognize that a balance between both incentives and disincentives is necessary to meet long-term growth.
So I say Metrolinx can't do it alone. Partnerships either with government or others are required.
Cross off this we endorse and getting rid of the legislative barriers.
Toronto is very important to me. I want to make sure that she stays a vibrant city.
My unique perspective is, I guess, traveling around in Scarborough and where I and students fit in.
I think I reflect a woman's perspective. I also think that I bring a business perspective.
I remember what it was like. I can appreciate some of the growth problems that they've already had because I was here through it.
Trying to solve the first mile, last mile problem is a problem of convenience, I think a lot of people just would love to have a convenient solution for them to get from their houses to rapid transit.
I was amazed at how complex it is.
Now I know there are a lot of stakeholders involved in any project, be it the community.
They have to coordinate with, I think it was close to 20 little regions.
Different agencies, government, it's all interconnected and it's tougher than it looks.
What's my hope? My hope is that we have less and less cars on the road and that transportation becomes interconnected.
Just have them tap on, tap off, and just a seamless...
Very seamlessly.
So much a part of our lives that we don't think twice about using it.
25 years in the future, when these plans are hopefully flowering, I won't be here. I'm 72 now, but I love Toronto. I want it to continue to be a wonderful, vibrant city where people are happy to bring their children up.
I want to know where Toronto is going to look like in 25 years. That's going to be me when if I have kids. It's crazy to think about it that far, but you have to if you want to plan for the long term, right?
I think that GTHA has a tremendous opportunity to make this the best transportation system ever. So I think we have to think outside the box. Look at the natural resources we have. Look at how the population is growing, where people tend to be settling, where businesses are located, and make use of what we have to make this the best it can be.
Reference panel, and Peter would like to introduce some of the panel members are here today. Come on up.
Peter, take it away. Thank you. Thank you to you and all of your colleagues for the remarkable work you did, the written report we received from you. Thank you. It's great service to our work, and we appreciate it. And thanks for coming today, and I hope you will introduce your colleagues.
That's exactly it. I hope you'll agree with me that processes like this really remind us how essential it is to have citizens as part of these planning exercises. They are natural and essential allies. I'm really pleased to introduce to you this morning Percy McFarlane and Stanley Nwaba, two of the 36 members who served over the course of those 5 Saturdays.
Please both stand up just for a moment.
Yeah, I encourage you to take some care with the recommendations contained in the report. The video is really intended to be a bit of a teaser, but also to convey that all of the members really brought their heads and their hearts to bear on the difficult work that's ahead. So thanks very much for the opportunity to be part of the process.
Peter, thank you. And I also thought we should take seriously the minority reports. I thought it was interesting that you, in the end, despite the consensus building, that a couple of members felt compelled to write separate pieces, which I thought was actually added to the value of the report.
And this is one of the features of a reference panel. Any member who opts to serve on a reference panel, can write a short statement of concern or to highlight a recommendation that they think may have deserved greater attention.
And do you mind taking 1 minute on your own background that got you to the leadership of this panel?
I run an organization called Mass LBP, and actually I'm very pleased to say that this is the 3rd reference panel that we've run for Metrolinx. The first one concerned the investment strategy. Then we looked at the land use plan for the Davenport Diamond. At this point, in Canada, we've run almost 35 reference panels involving 1,500 Canadians in 3 provinces and nationally in deliberative, long-form processes that give people really a chance to get under the hood of these complex issues. Canada is increasingly being recognized as a leader in this kind of approach. The OECD visited our office last month. They were really interested in the Metrolinx process, and they're going to be reporting out globally on these initiatives in the future.
Thank you very much, Peter. Leslie, back to you.
Thank you. So I will give a short overview of the draft plan. Of course, this is an evolution since our last year release of the discussion paper, which set the stage for this draft. And it's important to note that as required by our Metrolinx Act, this draft plan must conform with other provincial documentation, such as the Growth Plan and the Greenbelt Plan. At its very highest level, the conceptualization of what we're trying to achieve over the long term is reflected in how movement and trips have evolved in this region. I would say in the early 70s, there was a fairly clear binary relationship between home and work, which resulted in numerous trips, but pretty straightforward in terms of the type of infrastructure and service we needed. That has changed tremendously in terms of where people are living and working in the region. It's far more spread around. But with the advent of the growth plan, which set in place the urban growth centers that all municipalities are aligning their intensification with, we have the opportunity and have been given a background and foundation to really advance us to a much more rational and integrated, seamless system, and that's the future we want to work towards. Since 2008, there is a lot that has changed in this industry. In particular, the role of the private sector in meeting some of the needs of people traveling, not only in public transit, but in technology, on-demand types of trips. The shared economy is bringing forward different opportunities and choices for how people move around, and how we plan for the future needs to take that into consideration. The growth that we experience, as the forecasts are showing, and one of our greatest strengths is we continue to attract families and individuals from around the world to this region for its opportunity, its livability, and the quality of life that is offered. This chart points to the different types of travel markets across the region, because of course there's a lot of variability in the urban form in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, differing from something as highly populated and intense as the downtown Toronto and our more remote, both suburban and rural communities in different parts. We are fortunate to be building this draft plan on the amazing investment, historic investment, and the largest, as Peter mentioned, in North America, of over $30 billion since 2008 to address what was at that time the most pressing need to catch up with years of underinvestment. So $30 billion is translating itself into an incredible investment, and it will bring us forward. But it's really important to be clear that we cannot stop at this point. We need to continue because the growth is continuing to happen. So what we have done through the consultation, and particularly at this point, I want to thank the planning commissioners from all the municipalities around the region who have helped us basically reset the vision statement, the DNA of the 2008 vision of the big move, which built on the three pillars of a strong, prosperous economy, a healthy environment, and a high quality of life, is now articulated in a far more succinct way. There is a strong emphasis of the importance on the integration with land use. And the goals are very much packaged into rather three categories for 2041. The draft plan sets out 5 core strategies for how we think and we recommend that we should move forward. The first strategy is about completing what is in delivery right now. In other words, do not stop the momentum. There are some specific actions in the draft report, including the importance, we've just finished talking about Union Station, increasing the capacity for that expansion beyond the RER program. There is also the need to coordinate with other initiatives on the horizon, including the province's high-speed rail. I think it's interesting to note that when we laid out the map in the big move of what represented regional rapid transit, really it was a very sparse map. I'm proud to say that since 2008, the commitment that is in place and in action is represented by not only what is fully funded and well underway, as Peter just previously reported, but those projects that are in development, continuing to have a ready pipeline of projects that are moving and advancing to higher levels of stages of readiness. This map represents projects that we have previously referred to as the next wave. So that includes the Relief Line, the Yonge Subway North expansion, connectivity through the bus rapid transit between Durham and Scarborough, and numerous others. The second strategy talks about that we need to further increase the number of connections across the region through providing more frequent rapid transit. This is an important component to build out the system, and we are using a term of frequent rapid transit network to explain that. This really, if this chart tries to illustrate, is that it's increasing layers through the network that begins at the local level in terms of the local transit service that's in place, and progressively works its way up higher to more frequent, high-order transit that is really the GO RER. And together, all these layers will really introduce the frequent rapid transit. So the plan talks about filling in the gaps in that network with things such as priority bus routes. There is a recommendation for acting on a 24-hour bus network, particularly because we know work is changing. It is now no longer a traditional 9-to-5 exercise, and we need to be able to meet those future needs. This map illustrates, I won't go into it in detail, albeit to say that this is what we are now going to go out and seek lots of feedback on. It was constructed in consultation with the municipalities and the transit authorities, so it is our first evaluation of it. We've taken, in terms of evaluating it, we have a very extensive scenario planning methodology where we combine both projects and programs in order to understand the benefits and outputs and performance of the combinations of all these pieces. Our third strategy is around the optimization of our transportation system. And this really is focusing on, it's quite an extensive section, focusing on how we improve the traveler experience. And that addresses a full range of components of any transportation system that go beyond hard infrastructure. So whether it is our fare system, the integration of services, how we really reinforce what we refer to as the first and last mile, that is the ability to get folks beyond just where the stations are, but at the door of their home, at the door of their workplace. How we embrace what is referred to now as mobility as a service or MaaS, and we integrate those through better technology and systems so that we are able to, a traveler is able to combine walking, cycling, bike share, car share, public transit, road access, traffic information into one complete series of offerings. There are a whole range of other actions related to barrier-free universal access, the importance of the quality of what we create, so the design excellence that we attribute to our system, and so that it's not just about steel and concrete. This is about the physical experience of our architecture, urban design and landscape architecture that we are impacting in the public realm. And then there's a lot of actions around how we can optimize the existing road and highway system, whether it's through the work and expanding the work that the Ministry of Transportation has initiated on the high occupancy vehicle network, and furthermore, how we address goods movement. A lot of the focus is on passenger movement, but an important, the lifeblood of this region is around how freight moves in and out and around. And we need to really think through more how that is addressed. I'm going to move through these images and get to strategy 4. This is a critical piece to this plan. How we integrate land use and transportation operates at many different levels. On one level, it is a kind of regulatory and legislative environment that sets out our ability to better integrate land use and transportation. And by virtue of that, how we decide the types of uses, the densities in and around a station is an enabler or a disabler of better active transportation and our ability to shift people, especially those short trips, to seeing cycling, walking, rolling as viable alternatives. The fifth strategy is around the fact that we are at a time where the industry is moving at a pace of change for which the endpoint is not quite totally certain or prescribed at this moment. So whether it is with regard to the future of the impact of shared mobility, how autonomous vehicles are going to change the concept of parking, how it's going to change how we think about car ownership, how we are going to address climate change and being able to design a resilient system, how we ensure that our system is, as far as possible, creating low carbon mobility options. Peter just previously talked about testing of hydrogen. We need to make sure that we are, no stone is unturned in this way, and how we ensure that we're continuing to innovate. Ultimately, this is a plan. The draft plan itself is proposing that we expand the amount of frequent rapid transit by 24 times, that we're doubling the amount of planned cycling network, and that we expand the amount of managed lanes throughout the region, and that's automobile lanes, by over 15 times what it is today. We hope through this draft, the way that it is cast right now, anticipates that the walking distance to rapid transit will dramatically increase, thus making trips, that number of trips, less dependent on the automobile. And these two illustrations show how we see the impact of the expanded transportation system and the programs that I described to make access to jobs for more people. The other thing that the plan does is expand and increase trips for the full range of markets in the region, not just in the downtown, but throughout other parts, because in fact, as I showed earlier, it's not only about traveling to downtown Toronto. There are lots of employment centers emerging or existing in other parts of the region. The other piece is about trying to ensure that travel times, which is one of the most challenging things to reduce, given that over 110,000 people are arriving and making this region their home every year. So stemming that growth is part of the challenge. Finally, it's important to note that this plan sets out what we need to achieve the vision by 2041. There is a further discussion that needs to happen around how we achieve the plan, and we talk in the plan, the draft plan, about the importance of developing, once we've landed on what it is we want, where we want to go, how we do it through an implementation plan. And two key aspects of that will be understanding how we improve regional decision making. We've had close to 10 years of growing and improved collaboration with the municipalities, but we need to now, we will need to continue to grow and mature that. And secondly, that we continue to commit and ensure that there is levels of commitment to making sure that the plan is well funded. Finally, I would like to thank again the Residents' Reference Panel, for whom many of their recommendations, in fact, almost all of their recommendations, we have tried to reflect in the actions that are embedded in this draft plan. There are a number of forums for which we will be seeking engagement, including our digital engagement at metrolinxengage.com over the next several months. And we are excited to be at this stage to have this discussion. And at this point, I welcome the board's feedback, and our specific recommendations are to advance the draft for consultation, dependent on any amendments the board would like to see happen, and as well as some fine-tuning around formatting, minor copy editing, and that we will report back to you in December on the input we've received and present a draft of a final plan. Thank you again.
Leslie, that's a hell of a piece of work.
Yes.
What's that, 2 years' work? Summarized in
Feels like 100, but yes, 2 years.
Congratulations. Do you want to just introduce your two colleagues?
Thank you. First of all, our Director of Regional Planning, Antoine Belayev, and Lisa Salzberg, our Manager of Systems Planning. They have been really holding the backbone. They make me look good. And also in the audience somewhere is Peter Paz, our Manager of Regional Partnerships, who's been responsible for reaching out because this effort has not been done by ourselves. We've done it very much with the people who will use this document the most, municipalities.
Let's open up discussion. UPCAR's first on the list, and Golden is second.
Leslie, it's a great work. The plan is a comprehensive integrated plan that covers a number of different modes of travel, walking, cycling, goods movement, and roads, etc. Metrolinx has a certain mandate and accountability and responsibility. How do you view our role in being able to take the steps necessary to move in the direction of this plan, subject to consultation and final approval, to make things happen? How do you see that working? Because we don't necessarily have a mandate to cover all those different areas.
Correct. A couple things. There are specific actions in here that for which I think Metrolinx can, because of its responsibility and mandate, can take full leadership directly on. There are others for which our leadership role will be more around convening others and advocating. But ultimately, I refer to the implementation plan. That plan will have to begin to lay out one, roles and responsibilities, clarifying the necessary forums to advance some of the actions. It will begin to prioritize, I think, the range of actions in what order and how to dovetail it what we already have underway. Because we're not starting from a clean slate. There is work underway already, some of which we want to make sure that, as we talked about before, it's future-proof. So we have a number of roles from both advocate, leader, and actually deliverer of some of the pieces, but I think convening, coordinating, that will be one of our most significant roles.
I assume that would include providing the necessary analytical frameworks to some of the decisions we need to make as well.
Yes, so we continue through this work, and there will be subsequent work coming out of this to always make as our foundation sound analysis and evidence based on the best information that we have at the moment. And we continually update that. As you recall, even after we did the 2008 big move, we did a technical update about 2.5 years in, and then a further update to make sure that the plan remains on its track, but at the same time relevant.
I have Ann and then Carl, and then I'm going to ask Bill to comment since you were here for the plan a decade ago.
Well, three main points. First of all, I'm very pleased and excited to support its public release. Not everyone in the room realizes that this is not the first time the board has seen this, and we have gone through it before, and I want to say that the progress that you've made in the time available is absolutely impressive, and it just feels great. And I've been involved, so I have been involved closely. The second thing is I'm particularly excited to see the focus on the whole integration theme and the integration of land use and land use planning and transit planning and investment, fundamental to our ability to address growth in the region, to our success, to our ability to have a prosperity that's sustainable, so critical. I want to link it to a question that Upkar asked. It says in here, making it happen depends upon rethinking governance and funding. And that has been probably my favorite policy topic for 25 years. So I only plan to speak about, an hour and a half. So on that score, I just want to make two very specific suggestions, but just to say that I have a profound interest and I will continue to be available. On page 62, and basically this relates to connecting Strategy 2 and Strategy 4. We talk about we want to connect the region with more frequent transit. We're talking about expanding GO. Yet some of the GO sites, they go through areas called employment lands. It's actually page 62 of the hard copy, which I've been using. And some of it goes through lands that have been zoned employment, and they're really like former industrial sites, and they are barren. And in David Crombie's growth plan, the rhetoric he talks about, as I recall, he talks about synergies from mixed use and from intensification. But there's no reference specifically, and I understand this is general, but I would love to see it if you could make a connection between the GO stations, and some of them the new GO stations, and the rhetoric in the growth plan about creating synergies for more intensification, and see if we can't turn that rhetoric into reality. That would be one specific suggestion. And I've spoken to both planners and developers about this. Developers who have plans to intensify with mixed use and are frustrated because the zoning is an old zoning and it doesn't take account of the rhetoric that we all now apparently believe in. The second point would be going back to the funding issue. And, we did all that work, and actually, Paul Bedford is here, so I'll give you a call out because he was my co-chair on the transit planning and looked at the reality of what it's going to take to fund all this. And in fact, our earlier guest this morning raised a concern about the funding. I think part of the obstacle in getting a realistic funding plan is that people don't understand what it takes to fund. You reference here, and I'm pleased to see it, Leslie, on page 118, that there's operating, financing, and all of these costs. But there is a chart in our transit plan that I do recommend for inclusion because it points out, it's just a nice, simple fabulous little chart that she said modestly that illustrates the difference by modality, by type of modality. So if you're building a subway, the costs of maintaining and operating it, et cetera, are 75% of the total cost, whereas if you're building a bus rapid transit use, it's operations that really are the bulk of it, and therefore it's cheaper to maintain. And so these are global numbers here, but I do think part of it is getting the public to get what it really costs. So those are two specific suggestions on the broader theme of, because this is about integration, see if we can't, throughout the report, actually link the strategy with the whole theme of integration. By and large, though, I just want to compliment and congratulate you on your team. And I should mention, you mentioned one of the minority reports. One of the minority reports actually has a very good section on the need to rethink governance. So people are starting to get that. So thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.
So, Ann, thank you for that. I just want to make sure you open by saying you support the resolution.
I do.
Are you asking for changes in the text, if possible, between now and the formalization of the consultation draft over the next 2 weeks on the 2 points you raised?
If it's possible, but not to be I don't want to be a stump in the river on it. I think it would help.
And don't hesitate to write a few paragraphs to Leslie with any particular suggestions.
But I don't want to impose. I don't want to impose.
I hear you.
Okay,
You're good to go, but there is work. We purposely set this up with 10 days or so to take any comments today and see if we can tweak the language. So thank you very much for that intervention and your contributions. I have Carl and then Bill.
Thanks very much. From the discussions that we've had before as a board and also that I've had with Leslie and others, it was encouraging the real macro approach to this and taking a look at it from a big picture. And I think you used the one word, Leslie, in terms of leadership, and Metrolinx really does have a leadership role in this. And to that extent, my comments that I made before, I think still are valid and maybe not totally reflected here. Recognizing that Metrolinx has a mandate that is somewhat limited in the overall scope of things. Primarily, it's the GTHA, of course. But we also, Metrolinx, serves other areas in the outer reaches. In other words, the Greater Golden Horseshoe. So those jurisdictions, notwithstanding the specific mandate, I think we have a responsibility to say what some of those things could be and should be looking like in the future. So I think the Greater Golden Horseshoe, although mentioned in about 2 places or so, more emphasis could be given to this and more thinking of how areas in the Greater Golden Horseshoe will be impacted by this plan as we have it here, and therefore should be included to a greater extent in the thinking. But to answer your next question, probably, Rob, is that I'm happy to wait for the consultation process to see whether or not that falls out of it later on.
So you don't want to submit a paragraph or two that you'd like to see?
Oh, I can submit something, yes. But
You might try to make it, just see if they can accommodate it within the text, or if it's a later amendment.
That's fine.
I'm happy to have it. Thank you, Carl. Bill, you were here.
Excuse me. I'm not prepared now to give a paragraph.
But over the next week?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Bill, you were here 10 years ago when the big move was embraced unanimously by the board at that time. What's your take on this version?
Well, Mr. Chairman, actually, I was here 20 years ago when we started this process as a member of GO Transit. And at that time, I can tell you that each of the members of GO, which was the chairs and the mayors of certain cities around the region, we all wanted to expand, at that time, GO. And we dreamed, and I mean dreamed, about electrification. We dreamed about adding train sets. We dreamed about expanding our system, and it was just a dream. And sometimes it felt like a nightmare because we were getting absolutely nowhere. We ran a great system with GO. It was a fabulous system. It was a commuter system, and it was probably amongst the best in the world, had the best financial results in the world, but we wanted much, much more. But there wasn't $1 available at that time. And then a number of years later, we found that maybe there was some money available, and maybe these people, would dream along with us, because no one was really interested in this type of system. And not only this, the transit system generally across the region. There weren't a lot of people. We'd all complain, but we really wouldn't do much about it. And around 2005, 2006, Mr. Chairman, I did become a member of the new Metrolinx board, and we began to dream much bigger, but we saw an opportunity of something actually happened. And when we produced the big move, which is really the basis of what this plan is about, we realized that the dreams that we'd had just might start to come true. As many of you know, I was involved at York Region, and in 2003, I had a dream for York Region as well, and I still believe that we were the only ones that began implementing the dream, even without having any dollars behind us. We fought and worked on getting something. And in 2008, when the big move was passed by the members of our board at that time, we really weren't quite sure what would happen. But lo and behold, others began to work with us, and before we know it, we had 10, 20, and now I think $30 billion. When I started in 1997, $10 to $15 million was something that we weren't sure that we would get. And we got a regular payment for GO, but expansion was very, very difficult. So our big move has become a very big move. And I think with this plan, it has become a much bigger move. And I think over the last 10 years since we passed the big move, people in our region have began to understand that as much as they love their vehicles, and I do too, there isn't room for all of us to just get into our four-wheel cars and begin to move. Now we are beginning to move in 5 or 6 different ways, and that's what this plan will continue to implement. And I think the next person who sits at this kind of table 20 years from now, when this plan is implemented, whatever changes we might make will be good, I'm sure, but the basic plan, I'm sure, will be in place. The people around a table like this 20 years from now, I hope will have someone who will remind them what 20 years was about previous, and will be able to say, like I am saying, that not only is this excellent, but those people who were involved had a dream, and that dream is coming to fruition. So, Mr. Chairman, I can only tell you that for someone like myself, it makes it all worthwhile to spend all the time, the energy, the good and the bad of this kind of job, to see that there is a good chance that what you might have thought about 10, 15, or 20 years ago will actually happen for the next generation. This is a generational change, and it's for the next generation. I remember telling many people in my region when we began, who said to me, "Why are you wasting all your time and your money, and our money, I should say, on transit when we're all going to have our cars in our garage and we're all going to have our single-family homes, and who are you kidding?" And I kept saying, this is not for you. This is for the generation next, and maybe the generation beyond that, because they will need this. We don't necessarily need it right now, but they will need it. And that's what this board is now undertaking with, I might say, and we didn't have this before, 38, I think it was 38 citizens, a few of them are here, who have added incredible input and positive value to what, Leslie, you and your team have had to gone through the last 2 years that felt like 100. And I understand your comment there, I can say. But certainly the input of the citizens generally, and the input of whatever citizens will be involved in the next 2 or 3 months is invaluable, but more importantly, really goes a long way to getting the added value and getting the input and getting the acceptance of a plan like this. We need 25, 30, or 40 billion dollars more, I'm sure, but it will be at the end money well spent. But at the beginning, it's a very difficult task to accomplish. So, Mr. Chairman, I can only say that it feels good again every 10 years, perhaps I'll have this feeling, I'm not sure. But congratulations to you, Mr. Chairman. And
You're going to support the resolution?
absolutely. Well, no, I want to go back. I want to go back to 1998 and have a discussion. Yes, I will support the resolution, and I congratulate staff.
Thank you. So we'll have to rely on one of the young members like Ann Golden
That's
to come
exactly,
back in 20 years and give the lesson. Thank you very much for that. What will the reaction be in York Region to the plan?
I think it'll be very positive again. Yes.
Great. I have Rahul and then Kathy.
Great. First of all, I support the recommendation. I can't wait to get this out and start getting feedback back in. I mean, that's the whole point of the process. That's great. So here's the nagging sort of question in my mind. And Bill, your comments are so prescient around this in particular. I mean, this is a massive plan. And when I think about that, I'm reminded that I love a big vision like everybody else loves a big vision. I also like getting stuff done. And my question to you, Leslie, it puts you perhaps in an unfair position somewhat, but it's as chief planner. Does the draft plan describe an idealized state of transit in the region? I mean, are we going so big that we painted a picture that said if everything was perfect, this is what it would look like? Or within that, is there a pragmatic, practical way to turn that dream into a reality so we're actually getting stuff done?
So the way I would answer that question is I visualize it as my feet fully planted on the ground, reaching very high. In other words, we have to set, we have to have a far-reaching goal, otherwise it will just be business as usual, and we know business as usual is not enough. But the analogy I use is because our ability to inform where and how we go is by what we're learning every day and over the last 10 years of what it takes to go from words on a page to actual projects that are funded, well-governed, and so forth. So that is part of the thinking. It is indeed, as you sit here, some aspects of the plan are incredibly ambitious, but there are also some actions in the plan that are doable tomorrow. So there is a combination, and I think that's what makes my evaluation of success of any plan is not how well it sits on a shelf or how perfectly the grammar is set out, but its ability to influence decision-making, and I think that's how we approach this plan.
Thanks, Leslie. I do want to say to the two members of the residence panel, if either of you want to jump into the conversation at some point, just come and sit at the table and give us your views if you want to. I'm not obliging you to, but you're most welcome, either of you, for all the work you did on this. I have Kathy, what's the view from Burlington, Kath? And then Janet, view from Durham.
Opposite ends, Janet and I. First of all, I too support the recommendation to, within the context of taking whatever you have time to incorporate based on this feedback into the document, get it out and get it into the public domain so that we can start really getting at, how is this resonating with critical stakeholder groups across the region. I have two questions, I guess. The first one actually builds on Rahul's point. And you have a number of slides in here that talk about 2011, and then you've got minimum, and then you've got plan charts, doing the minimum and then the plan. As I was thinking of how aggressive this is, and inspirational, not aspirational, I think inspirational, I too had that question in my head. If we were, really trying to balance priorities, is the minimum doable just completing what's on the plate, or is it incorporating some of the to-dos that are there that we know we can get done that perhaps are not quite as heavy lifting? But the second part of the question, I think the more important part of my question, is when I got to the fifth section and I was thinking of how the world is changing so quickly, the impact of technology, the impact of the uncertainties, questions that we don't have answers to. Where will hydrogen technology take us? Will it take us there in time? The whole concept of electrification, sustainability, weather, climate change, all of that. I'm thinking to myself as well, are we comfortable, and this is a question to you, that we will be able to ensure sufficient resilience and flexibility to be able to manage the levers as we work through this. So the questions are kind of connected, but not.
So first, the definition of due minimum in the plan, in the draft plan, referred to if everything that is on the books now continues and is committed, that nobody turns back the clock and underinvests, or policies that are in place now are changed in a dramatic way. So that's due minimum is just more or less the status quo. And then 2041 is the combination of all the actions. If we were able to accomplish all the policy changes, the programs, and so the plan, by setting out 2041, sort of says it's not only about the concrete and the steel and the wheels, it's all of the components moving together.
Yeah.
So I think, so that's on that part. So to your second part, which was around how well are we being able to address what we refer to as the uncertain. So the methodology we have used is what I would consider our best approach. We are using tools through modeling and scenario planning to sort of test a full range of extremes of how aspects of the plan would be adopted under varying conditions, different economic conditions, different environmental conditions, different land use conditions, and testing it against it to say how will we know, and which of these combinations of all these programs and projects sort of tries to meet or can get to us to a place where we're most resilient, because these extreme scenarios are possible. And so this is our, on the basis of that, and of course the aspirations of the local communities, which is the feedback from individuals, municipal officials, is where this starts to synthesize. I think the fact of going out now to the public is a mechanism to sort of ground truth, whether or not we've hit the plan at the right level of prescriptiveness, while at the same time defining the right level of ambition. So it's not just a matter of discussion to develop this. There are technical tools upon which we do hard evidence and analysis to come up with the quantification and evaluation of the outputs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Janet, the voice from Durham, and then Bonnie, the voice of students, and Marianne, the voice of design. And then we'll see where we are. We'll take those three comments and then see where we're at.
Job descriptions. Anyway, no, Leslie, thank you very much to you and your team for all the work you've done on this. I think it's come a long ways and will continue to progress very well. So thank you for that. A couple of things, just I think the picking up on the goods movement, I think is really, really good to do that, and I hope we can continue to have that as part of, because it is very much an important piece of what needs to be considered as we do all of the other transportation stuff. The second thing that I thought was really good, and actually you might want to try to reflect it even more in the video, is that this plan is also contemplating the fact that there are a lot of people who work shifts. There are minimum wage workers out there, and having things like 24-hour bus networks and that. I mean, because for so many years we've been so focused on the, coming from 9:05 into 416, in the morning and home in the evening kind of concept. And as we know, the economy's taking us in a whole different area. So I think the recognizing of that, and actually maybe, as I say, if you're looking at recutting the video down the road, making sure that you've got a potentially, minimum wage or shift worker as part of your, and I suspect you had them in the panel, but I don't think we want to lose that, because that's really, really, really important. The other thing is the clearly building on what's gone before, and making that very prominent, because I think, as we've discussed at this table before, I think the public gets a little frustrated because the perception is that, nothing actually gets done, that there's just decisions and talk, but things are not actually getting done. But as this is making very clear, a lot is getting done, and it is actually flowing. And some days it actually does look like a plan, which is even better. So, so thank you for that. The other point, and again, getting back to the other side of the bookend here at the east side, we can see how community's frustration about whether their transportation needs are being met or not being met can very much drive policy decisions, as we saw in Scarborough. Because you had a community there that expressed their views very clearly in elections, and there was great frustration that drove that because they weren't seeing or feeling like their needs were being met. So I think some of the comments that we've had from Durham Region, from Roger and that, and I think anything that we can do to continue to highlight that progress has been made, that there are things there that are meeting Durham's needs. Seaton, for example, is a very valid point about what's happening out there and how that is being integrated into our thinking and some of those other things. So I think we need to make sure that we are reflecting what's happening for all regions and that everybody can kind of see their needs somehow being reflected in there. And then the final, just a quick question. You talk about implementing mobility as a service strategy is one of the things. Mm-hmm. What does that actually look like on the ground, or what is that supposed to look like on the ground for a customer?
So it's actually, it doesn't look like anything physical. It is the connective tissue. So it could be an app that you have, and I actually have to get from my home to the arena with my kids. And so simultaneously, I can connect 2 different trips, on-demand service, to a train station, and then the combination of I've got a car share at the other end that I'm meeting my 13-year-old with their hockey bag, and we'll drive to the arena. But it's presented as one package of services, as opposed to me having to interface with it's like an interface. It's more of an interface. I'm going to look to Antoine and Lisa to make sure I haven't totally bungled that description.
Yeah, I would say that, it's not only that you have information about not only that you have information about different services, but there's actually an integration of those services that exist. So that to get from one door to the end point of your trip, there's an integration of private and public and services that you may be subscribed to, like car sharing, that allows you to have that full trip planned for you through the system.
So when I read that, my immediate thought was people with mobility problems, disabilities, etc. So would that be included? So if I do have
yes.
I know there's nothing more frustrating when they're trying to plan, how to get from A and B, and they don't know if, the elevator's working, in the subway station. I mean, something as basic as that. But it would include trying to do
it could.
Responses
and,
for
and it's something that's happening. This is not like a fictional thing. It's actually happening in other places around the world now. And when I earlier talked about the role the private sector is having in this industry, this is a place where actually transit operators are somewhat behind, and we need to understand better how we're going to advance this, because this is meeting true traveler needs and a better customer experience.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Bonnie, and then Marianne has the last word.
So, as someone who has family in Barrie, I live in Toronto, and my employer's in Peterborough. I do a lot of commuting. So this notion of seamlessness and integration and picking up on one and being able to figure out how to get from here to there it just resonates loud. So first of all, I missed one iteration over a couple of weeks I was away. Come back to this when I've read it. I want to offer congratulations. This is a huge piece of work to get it to the state it's in, and I'm very supportive of getting this out there. And it's kind of amazing what happens in 3 weeks would be sort of my comment in terms of your being able to synthesize and bring in the inputs. All of that said, I'm taken by the notions that are kind of prevalent through it, whether it's around focusing on funding or decision making or governance, that you consistently read points where those things have to work in a much more integrated way. We had one particular experience with the investment strategy that was a huge effort with Metrolinx, and so, whether it's the call for an update in the investment strategy, or whether it's the call for an alternative or a new model, maybe for regional decision making, or whether it's the call for balancing the collaborative initiative with that which is very much local and focused on immediate needs in a particular area. I wondered if, two things, whether there is some work being done offline on the how behind that. How do you get to those states of being that are clearly envisaged in the plan? Whether it is the development of an investment strategy that just doesn't emerge out of Metrolinx, but emerges from what you're calling for, which is more integrated thinking about how the funding models should work and how resources could be set aside for that seamlessness commitment, integration commitment, and so on. And then secondly, when I read the reference panel recommendations, and again tied it back to some of the systems and services being supported within the plan, it made me think that maybe we're at a point where there's a new principle that has emerged from the reference group's work that should be front and center around the investment strategy that emerges. And that's a principle that speaks to the contribution that gets made out of whatever we are doing towards that better integrated, seamless way of working within our transportation networks. So, I don't have the answers, but I had the question about, is there an enabler? Is there something already occurring in terms of the how of implementing getting to some of these states? And then secondly, I just think there's an opportunity maybe to revisit the principles that were behind the funding and governance of this. I like them. I don't think any of them should disappear, but there may be a new one around this seamlessness and integration that should be a central part of our thinking for future investment strategies.
So Leslie, I'd like you to interpret those comments largely as comments, not questions,
yes.
because the Secretary has pointed out I'm not doing a very good job, and we've got us 40 minutes behind the agenda, which is going to shortchange other things later. So if you can give a snappy two-liner answer to Bonnie, and then go offline later, and then I'm going to ask Mary Ann to take the closing comments, and then I'm going to test the resolution.
So, yes, there's a lot of thought that continues to happen on an ongoing basis around these, but I guess the thing that both the reference panel and our draft plan speaks to is much of it is voluntary and built on good collaborative relationships. And I think what we're seeing is the need, as we mature as a region, for possibly more structure around that.
Thank you.
That was a very snappy answer. Good job. Mary Ann, the last word.
My orientation has always been toward design excellence, sort of understanding how the customer moves through space on different systems, an integrated transit system. But I'm sort of going to take it up to a higher level, and I mean, I think I really commend you for the changes. I think all of these documents are iterative. Looking back 10 years or 20 years, we are in a time of such disruptive change, technological change. And I've sending to the board members the managing director of Daimler-Benz talking about from artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, the shifts in technology as Airbnb and so on and so on. I think it's really, one of the things that you see being not a constant in its constant state, but a constant need is an integrated transit system. So I think in some ways we're at in terms of the flood that's about to happen and overtake us with technology, I think public transit is really one of those. And I think to be nimble in terms of how we think about public transit within this disruptive time and how things will change, and that but I think we are more, as I say, on a higher ground, not a higher moral plane, but a higher ground in terms of the flood that's about to happen to us. So I commend you for introducing those topics and never to forget, that I tried to make it with Peter Zook, maybe not very articulately, but that Union Station has a certain capacity. We need an outer ring almost, around Union Station to be able to kind of connect, because not everything can go through Union Station into the future. But I support the resolution, and I think, very well done, and to your team as well.
Thank you, Mario. Why don't you move the resolution?
I will move the resolution. Do I have to read it?
Ann, will you second it? You don't need to read it. Does anybody want to make any further comments? I haven't intervened, and Brian, you haven't intervened, but I think we both are of the same view that we should definitely go public with this document now and get the debate going and invite the broadest possible engagement in the communities, and you've got a very demanding series of consultations in every part of the region, and lots of different formats, so all of that will be very valuable. When you come back in December, I hope you'll think of a way to let us know what you learned from that, in addition to actually having a revised text. But I think it'll be important us to understand what themes emerged in your consultation, so we can then test the revised text against what you learned in all those consultations. I think it'll be an important process for us to benefit from as you go. But thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
All in favor? Any against? Congratulations.
Thank you very
Really
much.
good job. Really good job. We're going to keep pressing ahead. We are going to end up being late. We are meant to be done by 12:40. I don't think we'll be done. For those of you that are measuring your need to go to the washroom, I think it'll be about 1 o'clock before we're actually done. The next item on the agenda is the GTHA fare integration. Do you want a break, Leslie? Do you want me to do something
fine.
else first?
No, I'm fine.
You're okay?
Yep.
The
I drank my coffee.
the Iron
I'm
Woman
good.
of presentations.
Good.
We're looking for you to speak to us on GTHA fare integration update. Leslie.
So I'm actually just going to do an introduction, and I will actually ask Martin Powell to carry through the presentation, albeit to say that we're pleased to present to the board a significant, what I would call, way forward to advance fare integration. We are at the stages that the preliminary business case on the concepts is mostly completed, and as a result of that, we have identified how we would take that learning and begin to address what we are referring to as the barriers to fare integration across the region. There are specific recommendations. Flip to the next slide. And insofar as what we are asking the board today to do as really support this step-by-step strategy, and that we report back at the end of the year on advancing 4 key elements on fare integration barriers. More work on discount on double fares, both GO TTC and 905 TTC, how we can address adjustments to the GO fare structure itself to improve the seamlessness of our fare system, and questions around policy harmonization of all the operators throughout the region. And with that, I'm just going to quickly hand it over to Martin.
Martin, thank you very much. I know you're our voice on this. What's changed since we last heard from you?
Well, as Leslie said, we have a different approach, and I can lead you through the deck here and maybe highlight some of the significant issues. I think, number one, we do have a fragmented fare structure in the GTHA, particularly at the Toronto boundary, where there is a double fare if you're even making short trips across that boundary, as well as we do have issues transferring between the GO system and the TTC system. They're not working as an integration, whereas in the 905, predominantly there is integration happening to some degree because they honor each other's fare systems. So this is a pressing issue because of the amount of money that's going into the infrastructure. We need
Just to be clear on that, in the 905, it's not just 905 is integrated with GO fares, it's also one region, 905 is integrated with other regions in 905.
Yeah, amongst the municipalities.
Among the municipalities.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Where we don't have it is between TTC and GO, and we don't have it between TTC and the 905 transit agency.
The ones immediately around Toronto, yes.
That is correct, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, I just want to be clear on the point.
The pressing need is related to the amount of money that's being put into infrastructure. So just moving quickly, we spent the last couple of years really focused on developing a business case around developing a long-term fare structure for the region. Most recently, we've been doing a lot of work really looking at not just the fare structure, but the price of the different fares, the products that are available in the different transit agencies, how the concessions vary between the different transit agency, as also related to the payment requirements. And that has identified that there are inconsistencies, particularly on the policy side. things like transfers. On the TTC system, for example, when you pay your fare, it's for one direction. When you're in the 905 transit agencies, when you pay your fare, it's for a 2-hour period, whether you take 2 short trips in that 2-hour period or whether it's one long one. Another thing is that in the many of, or all of the municipal transit agencies have period pass, monthly pass systems, whereas some of them have loyalty programs, and of course GO is a loyalty program. So there's no consistency across the GTHA on that regard. Our big issue is if we do nothing, which is, I think the concern that's gone on for many years, things are only going to drift to the worst. Not because anybody is predominantly trying to create that environment, but everybody is focused on looking at their own systems and what's right for them. And we do need to have a more coordinated, inclusive decision-making so that all of the transit agencies, as well as GO and UP, are looking at it from a broader perspective and really to ensure that there isn't continued divergence. The technical analysis that Leslie referred to from the business case gave us some information that really is very important in the sense that every concept we looked at performed better economically than the existing state. So no matter what path we take, it's better than today. And I think that's an important issue. I think we also, and looking at it, moving to a more fare by distance concept does actually achieve more of the transformational strategic vision that we were trying to focus on at the beginning and where we want to potentially have a goal of moving to. However, it requires significant change, not only for the transit agencies, but for the customers. And because of that, we need to take that into consideration. And as I said, the concept that was the least change, which was the modifications to the status quo, performs well and is a good starting point to make changes in the short term over the next 2 to 5 years. And really, that's the step-by-step approach. But we do need to keep in mind, until a decision is made on what the long-term decision or fare structure should be, that we need to keep in mind that a consideration that in the future we may want to move to fare by distance in the region. So again, I think to make that long-term decision, we need a formal and inclusive decision-making process in place to determine what that long-term structure should be. The municipal transit agencies have a different funding formula than the GO and UP, and for that reason, there needs to be full participation of everyone to make that decision before it's made of what the long term is. In the meantime, the step-by-step approach would address discounts where there's double fares. We need to look at the GO fare structure. It's often referred to as a fare by distance, but it isn't. It's really a modified fare by distance zone system, and it needs to be addressed to look at the short and medium trips, as well as create a more logical fare by distance structure. And finally, an area where I mentioned earlier, the fare policy harmonization is an area where we really need everyone to work together to really move towards a more consistent formula for concessions, the transfer stopover, as well as products, to simplify the rules for customers that are traveling across the region. I think it's important that we make sure that anything we do in the short term will not preclude changes in the long term until that decision is made and where we should go. So very simply, looking at where we want to go, immediately begin focus on removing the barriers. We need to begin by adopting elements of the modified existing concept in the short term. A formal inclusive decision-making process needs to be put in place to establish the long-term GTHA fare structure vision. And this approach would allow for the transition period needed while making positive progress. And we intend to basically do engagement between now and the end of the year. There'll be public engagement as well as further engagement with the municipalities, which we would like to include not only the staff, but the mayors and regional chairs. And also there are other key stakeholders like the MPPs and academics and advocacy groups. So with that, I'd really like the board to consider the recommendations that we put forward and the resolution included with them.
Just one footnote, Chair, to if I was to describe where I would say we're situated now in fair integration, we are putting forward what I consider a pragmatic approach to ensure that we're making progress. We're done.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions, reservations, support for the recommendation? Upkar and Brian are first.
So Leslie and Martin, great work. It feels to me we've been talking about fair integration for a long time. And so...
You're not wrong.
We have.
And I understand and I actually endorse the premise of making incremental progress, a step progress, until we get towards a bigger issue. Martin's touched on the need for dealing with that thorny, complex issue of what that governance structure looks like. But what could we do? What role can we take, whether it's a framework, a plan, a deadline, milestones, the same way that Rob Hollis did on Presto to force the municipalities and us to come together on a 10-year plan for Presto? How can we accelerate that so we don't keep pushing out and kicking the can down the road with respect to that bigger, broader issue to really show step progress, major step progress on that bigger issue?
Yes. So yes, it does seem like a long time, but I want to say that this journey in both the technical aspect of the work and the conversations to bring us to this point to be recommending this approach has actually been with the operators, and it's really been a learning and education for all of us to understand the challenges we face. I would say that all the operators understand the need and the benefit to being more coordinated, operating more efficiently. The challenges come around what would be the change management strategy to get us to the end. And so I think our role to date, convening and elevating this topic for discussion, has already raised our ability to step forward. Going forward, I think we believe that after having done all this work so far, that just decreeing a future that we're going to flip to tomorrow is not really a practical way to move forward. We need to have everyone on board, and that is going to take, as the presentation talks to, significant shifts around how decisions are made and a kind of way to converge the different business models. We have 10 different business models, because the underpinning of a fare structure is how we do our own accounting. So that's, I would say, the place we have to make progress. But the work we've done to date starts to set us up to understand the problems better together, not just by ourselves. If it does seem like it's taking a while, I would say there's two components to why. One is, as we wrestled with about a year ago, it's never been done before, and so we had to develop a whole bunch of new tools to do this work. That we are grateful that we've moved forward. And then really the conversations with the transit operators are not things that you rush. These are conversations that we're having together. Some of them are here in the room today, and there's a lot of things that we are trying to work through because the impacts of everything we're discussing are significant.
So this is just a quick follow-up question. So I agree with that. I wasn't proposing that there was a declaration by fiat that we go to a certain, but I wanted to maybe think about a game plan, a time horizon, because ultimately we have to think about the customer centricity. And while transit operators may be slower, we do want to deliver for our customers at the end of the day.
So I think the four key barriers that we want to focus on to address have direct customer benefits. And I think the more rapidly we can advance those, the sooner we're going to be able to help this region imagine what a seamless, integrated, fair system can look like.
Brian?
Thank you. Just one observation and then sort of one question or assertion that I'd like to have confirmed because it's implicit in the material. First, let me say I support the approach being taken. I've got a certain frustration with it because, like UPCAR, I see, and that leads to my first point, and the observation is I see fair integration as critically important to the regional transportation plan.
Yes.
Without fair integration, you won't achieve the objectives in the last presentation. So that's why I feel so strongly that we have to figure out a way of moving the yardsticks. And I think you're on the only viable approach right now. The assertion or the thing that I'd like to make sure I'm reading properly into this document is that everyone else seems to have achieved a little bit of fair integration except Toronto. And so Toronto's the outlier, but it sort of makes sense to me. I mean, if I live in Toronto, I don't need to integrate as much, perhaps, because Toronto's so huge. A lot of my travel is just within Toronto. Is that part of the issue?
I think that was the case, I think, in the past, but it's starting to change. It's still only a smaller percentage of the number of trips that are happening today. But I think as the region evolves, it's going to become more and more important. We saw that in the regional transportation plan. People are moving in and out into different places in the region, not just the city of Toronto. So where in the past it was less of an issue, as we move forward, it's becoming more and more an issue. And I know, you hear stories. We did some, hearing from different users, particularly where they cross the border and maybe making fairly short trips. They go to great lengths to try to find different ways so they don't have to pay two fares. And it's particularly hard on the low income. We know around the airport there's a lot of employment just outside of Toronto. A lot of those people live in places like Rexdale and in Etobicoke. And so this issue is only going to get worse. And if we really want everything to be achieved in the regional transportation plan, I would agree it is critical that this be addressed.
If I can, and I'm just going to jump ahead of you because it's supplementary to Brian's point.
Aria.
Isn't part of it that it's just the amount of money that would be required to mitigate the problem? That is, I think what you're saying in this deck more clearly than ever before is fair integration is going to take additional subsidy. It can't just be done by fair rebalancing, but it's going to take investment by either the province or municipalities or some combination to get there. And because of the size of Toronto and the transit, the percentage of transit rides in the region that are in Toronto means any adjustment is going to be way more expensive.
Yeah, the absolute.
Just because of numbers. So
yes.
it's just a bigger bite. The benefit, of course, is equally proportional to that, equally that much larger.
Yeah.
But isn't that the other reason why we haven't gotten at it?
Yeah, this is two key things that we talked to are not only the decision making, but it's the funding. It doesn't happen for free.
Yeah. So we need an invest.
Yeah.
So in terms of changing the direction, as you move to this more incremental approach, it seems to me that potentially the advantage of this is it invites incremental investment. Correct. As opposed to big bang, it's a $120 million problem or whatever. It's something where you can bite it off. You can start taking bites at the problem and diminishing it by taking your incremental approach if funding is being a key barrier to making progress.
Yeah, so that's, yes, that is a benefit to the approach, yes.
Great. Anne?
Well, similar to where I was going, there's an old expression that when the watering hole shrinks, the animals look at each other differently. And I would just reverse it. If the watering hole were to expand, the animals would look at each other much more positively. Because this issue is pivotal in a real sense and symbolic in terms of the ability of the whole region to get together, I think it is, like everyone else at this table, top priority. And I did some back of the envelope figuring, and I actually don't think it's that.
Now we're in trouble, Robert, if she's taking your job as CFO. There's big trouble ahead.
But, Robert, I did it unencumbered by a whole lot of numbers. I just did it. But my guess is because 90% of the rider, I may have that number wrong, Martin, but it's a high percentage of all the ridership is in Toronto.
It is a high percentage, although the GO system kind of.
But the GO is very
So it's
small.
not all 90.
75%.
Is it 75?
Isn't it 75?
I think it's higher. No. I think it's over 80. Anyway, I think more people ride
more than 75.
the King streetcar than ride GO. Anyway, I think it was very, very high. All I'm saying is the level of subsidy, in my view, I think the message should, the level of subsidy, in my view, shouldn't be that huge. Leaving that aside, since that's not our job, what I want to say is this is probably the best deck we've had on this now, and we've gone through this a lot. So I just wanted to compliment you on that. The chart on page 390 of the digital, not of this particular presentation, showing the complexity. I felt that this is my last comment. When we first started this and thinking about fare integration many, many years ago, I thought, how complicated could it be? You go fare by distance and you figure it out. But then I sounded to myself a little bit like Trump. I didn't know it was so complicated. but now I do. So great deck. I support the plan as the best we can do in the current circumstances.
But you'd also support strong advocacy to put an investment in behind elements of the plan as available.
I absolutely would like to, and I would stress the message, both of it's pivotal to the success of all of the planning, but secondly, of symbolic value. It's just critical. But you can't have
Kathy, why don't you move this resolution, and Rahul, why don't you? Rahul, second it. Any more debate? Done. Good job, Leslie. Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to a number of documents.
Annual report.
This is the annual report.
Oh, yes. Looked very nice.
This has come from management into your committee, right, Brian? Brian, has your committee signed off on this?
Yes, we actually looked at it in June.
Could we dispense with the presentation and just ask you to say what the committee's reaction was?
Sure. The annual report is just that. It's the annual report. It's a document that's required, but also, in my view, interesting.
Apparently not to 3/4 of the people who are leaving. But
it's exciting.
It has the boring section, which are the actual audited financial statements, but it also has a summary of key activities in the year in which it covers, and that's the year that ended on March 31st of 2017. Presuming our board and the AFARM, the audit committee has already reviewed the financial statements, met with our external auditor, we're comfortable with the content. It was put out for public review since June, and we've had no comments back on it, so that probably means that people are either comfortable with it or haven't seen it, but it has been on the website in draft. After this board determines its support for it, it then goes to the government to forward it to the minister, and if the minister is comfortable with it, it's tabled in the legislature, and then it is a final document. It will be placed on our website as a final document. The reason why I'm emphasizing the website is that there will be hard copies available, but they'll only be in black and white. I would really commend people use the website model because it has a wonderful piece of art on the front cover.
I agree.
And that art is as a result of a contest that was sponsored by Metrolinx for school kids to draw images of Eglinton with the light rail transit in it. And a young woman whose name is Ariana, age 6. Her image was chosen, and it's on the front page. The other thing that I would say is a must look at and must read in this whole document is the very last page of the annual report, which is a glossary of terms. It will help make these meetings much more intelligible to all of us. So with that, I would certainly, on behalf of the entire Audit and Finance Committee, recommend that that the Metrolinx annual report be approved and that the CEO submit the annual report to the Minister of Transportation in accordance with the Metrolinx Act.
You good with that, Bill, to second that?
I am, yes.
Does anybody want to discuss it further? Thanks for your committee for reviewing it all. And I was going to comment on the artwork like you. I thought it was just sensational. So, all in favor? Any opposed? That's approved. That brings us to the Metrolinx business plan. Robert, how are we going to deal with this? Are we going to again ask Brian to go straight to it, or are you going to present? Or is there going to be a management presentation? It's been up for 3 months.
I think just given our time and the promise to get back on track, I would recommend that we post it. We took this through the Audit, Finance, and Risk Management Committee in June as well, but decided to post it and allow it to be up for 3 months to receive comments. We did receive comments from Roger Anderson and the team at Durham, and we are looking at those and we'll respond to those. I don't think it's, given that we're frankly halfway through the year, I don't know. I don't think we should spend much more time on it. I would say the same as Brian, that these documents, a lot of work and attention goes into them. They impact everyone in this corporation, and they provide, in this case, the short-term direction to this corporation. So with that said, I would, although I've asked Jen to come up to the table, I would say we should go directly to...
Why don't we go right to Brian then? Brian?
Well, the resolution is a two-part resolution, if I can go straight to it, and that is that the actual business plan be approved for submission to the Minister of Transportation and for the Minister's consideration and approval in accordance with the relevant section of the Metrolinx Act. And the second part is that in the event that the Minister requests material amendments to the business plan, an amendment business plan be brought back to the board for further consideration prior to adoption. I understand that is a rarity, if ever, but it is there as a second part of the resolution. So that two-paragraph resolution, I move.
Are you going to second that? Sure. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about this? All in favor? Approved. Jennifer, great presentation. Thank you very much.
Crystal clear.
Yeah, she can stay up for the enterprise risk management presentation.
But don't we have the Auditor General first, right?
Don't walk out of the room, please.
Is Peggy, where's Peggy? So Peggy, the next item up is your update on the current status and preliminary results of Auditor General follow-up activities. We've all read this. Could you please just tell us highlight anything where you're not happy with where we are? I know you're generally happy with how things are going, but please highlight anything you're not happy with, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I presented my full report yesterday, including all the details of the action plans against the Auditor General recommendations. Management is on track to meet all of the targeted implementation dates, and we have made it a standing agenda item on the Audit, Finance, and Risk Management Committee agenda. Thank you.
And so, from your point of view, we're on course
Absolutely
and
on
working
track,
through
and
every one of the recommendations?
Yes, and my team does an independent review of those.
Questions to Peggy? Comment from Brian?
No, as Peggy's already pointed out, it's near the top, only after safety, near the top of our meeting, every audit meeting.
And this is for information, or is this for this is just for information, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's received for information. Thank you. That brings us to the Enterprise Risk Management Policy and Framework. This is...
I'll lead in on the conversation on this, Rob.
Yeah, once you
So, and unfortunately, it's to express a little bit of embarrassment. I brought in the Enterprise Risk Management System back in 2010 and didn't bother keeping track of what was happening in the marketplace, and it caught up and went past us. So the good work of Jen Gray and her team is, and with the support of PricewaterhouseCoopers last year, helped us do a health check that showed that we had fallen behind, and this is part of the plan to address and get us back on top. As as a leader in this area. One of the other key things I think we did was we asked for the board to allow Kathy Barswick to be the vice chair of the Audit, Finance, and Risk Management Committee, and she is taking the lead from a board standpoint on helping us get up to be best practice in enterprise risk management. So maybe, Rob, my recommendation would be is that Jen and Kathy say something on where they think we are.
Okay, but as I understand it, again, Brian, this has gone through your committee.
It has.
Under the leadership of Kathy as the vice chair responsible for risk. Jennifer, you're the lead staff person, so maybe Kathy, if you want to say what your level of satisfaction is, and then Jen, if you think there's something we badly need to know, tell us. But again, knowing it's gone through the committee and it's all being read by everybody, I don't think we need to belabor it. If you're happy with it, Kathy, if you're not happy, please belabor it.
Yeah, no, I won't belabor it. In fact, I think that what I'm most pleased about, and I shared this yesterday with those who were at the audit committee, what I'm most pleased about is a robust framework, risk oversight framework, drives conversations that are helpful for the organization, that drive out appropriate strategic execution and oversight. And I'm already starting to see more and more conversation happening. And that's one of the objectives of the effort that's underway. I mean, we did have a framework. This is not, a ground zero start here. But really what we're trying to ensure as we work through the improvements in the process is that we have the right conversations at the right levels of governance. So when the board, the big board, the full board, is talking risk, you have been given the information, the reporting, and the oversight that you need to have the appropriate conversation at that level. Of course, the audit committee has a more detailed conversation and oversight role, and it's all in the materials that you have. And then, of course, the level of detail just increases as it works through the organization. I'm happy, very happy with where we're at so far. You can expect more time on agendas going forward to have, in fact, those appropriate conversations at the various levels of governance. And that's all I'll say.
Jen, do you wish to supplement this at all, or are you happy with the support you're getting from the vice chair?
I'm very happy with the support we're getting from the vice chair, and I do think we had a very good conversation at audit committee yesterday, and I think between Robert and the vice chair, we've covered off the really key components. Assuming the board has read the material, I think we can move. I have nothing further.
Does anybody wish to raise any questions about this upgrade of our risk management?
My only question is, Robert's lead was, you can get out of the industry kind of best practice pretty quickly and fall behind. So how do we ensure we stay at the front end of that? Is that the, now what Jennifer's doing in terms of bringing forward with a much stronger focus? How do we avoid getting there next time?
Yeah, and I think it's exactly that, is to keep the focus on it, to go to the, first of all, to bring in the staff that are charged with keeping us current, to make sure that we're participating with other agencies and the government itself on what they're doing to keep current. So there's lots of Crown agencies such as OPG and Hydro One that are, that have very sophisticated enterprise risk management systems. So we've been working with them to make sure that we're doing the same things that they're trying to do, and I think having someone like PricewaterhouseCoopers or any of the firms that specialize in this area come in every 2 or 3 years and just do a checkup on where we are.
The resolution is that we adopt this. Kathy, you'll move that?
I will move that,
Rahul,
yeah.
you'll second that? Any discussion? All in favor? That's approved. Thank you very much. That brings us to the customer experience report by the distinguished chair of the Customer Experience Committee, Marianne McKenna. Marianne.
Thank you, Robert. A number of slides to go through. I will highlight just the continuing efforts of the team to improve communications with customers, particularly through the website, web screen and browser that you're looking at. Website changes continue to happen. We'll, beginning in January 2018, again, expect to see more. Also the increase of customer service ambassadors who have providing announcements throughout various means to remind customers and to help customers in terms of moving seamlessly through the process. Next, the travel process. On the operations update, we see from Greg Percy's team on-time performance continues above target, and also as new services are introduced via rail and bus services. Again, I think I mentioned the customer service ambassadors. Automated announcements have been made on the GO buses and are extended to the trains. And I guess I would say, having been riding these trains a little bit in the last little while, that we need a balance between announcements that are continuing and screens on the train, digital signs on the trains, because I think there is an intention of people on those trains to actually work and or rest or take a breather through. So continuous announcements are not that happily received, except I think the TTC actually does a very nice balance of it, you know, getting you where you want to go and telling you when to get off and which direction to turn. I think we had a very fulsome report from Rob Hollis on the Presto, so I think I can skip over that and just come to the design excellence report which we received, and it chronicles the large number of projects that many are in the pipeline and predate, I think, the focus on the kind of customer experience aspects which really relate to seamless travel. So the legibility of stations, the clarity of wayfinding, the integration of fare integration, all of those are aspects of design excellence, but we are beginning to see the new generation in these renderings, and we look forward particularly to the Crosstown, Eglinton Crosstown, when it will be ready, you know, very shortly, I would say. So again, design excellence across the region. And I think this team has really grown with the encouragement and support of the board, so that every touch point of a customer or traveler's experience is something that we think about on this committee. Particularly, we look, you know, as part of this risk assessment, safety is a kind of one of the major concerns: accessibility, safety, legibility, and really that experience that encourages people to actually take public transportation and abandon their cars and the challenges of traffic. There was an update from marketing, so understanding where we are today. We have a new director, VP of marketing, who has putting together our plan looking forward for today, tomorrow, and what we will do together seamlessly. Connecting. Her big focus is really the seamless connection between the communities and the true regional experience and identity. And I think, you know, I think you begin to see it as a Metrolinx. The branding, I think, has been very helpful. I think people will come to understand that Metrolinx is really delivering at many different levels, from the GO system, the Up Express, through Presto. So I think that branding is very helpful. So thank you. Short.
Snappy, excellent.
Thank you.
Any questions to Marianne? Kathy?
Yeah, just an observation that I think we shouldn't lose, and it's on page 3 of your report and on page 574 of the overall package, and it's that blue bar in the middle that says 80% of customers rate on-time performance as their top priority. There's no surprise there, obviously. However, in our audit committee discussion yesterday, we were talking about what will it take this organization to move us up the spectrum of safety culture. You know, what needs to be continuing to improve or change. One of the conversation areas was, do you put on-time performance, whether it's project performance scheduling, ahead of safety, and is that one of the issues that culturally will get in the way of us moving up the spectrum? And I just want to table that, not for discussion now, we have no time, but to come back to, because customers want to be on time, they just take safety as a given. That's an automatic. 100% of them say, and I'm going to be safe. You know, we understand that. That's obvious. However, as we move our culture spectrum through, our safety culture, we need to be cognizant of ensuring that we are able to execute on that.
Let me ask Greg Percy to come forward, just make a comment on that, because I wouldn't want any ambiguity on the ranking of safety and on time.
I think it's very clear to the organization that safety is priority one.
Yep.
Customer service, great customer service follows that quickly. But there is no confusion at all that safety is priority one. And I'm happy to say that under our new leadership of George Bell, we're making some really solid strides in terms of getting that to steady state and keeping it there, because it's a slippery slope if you don't keep monitoring it.
And sorry, to be clear, I didn't explain that very well. In terms of the culture, the safety culture assessments and audit processes, it's not, the question isn't, would you rate safety ahead of on time or vice versa, and we're answering that wrong as an organization. But it's in implementations and the conversations that just happen. Is safety paramount over it? Inherently, culturally, yes. It's not coming through in some of the conversations around
I think
implementation.
It's a very big, on our committee, it's a very big priority, and it's taken increasing amount of focus, and I think adding George Bell to the reporting to us has been a very important part of it, and the risk assessment. So I would say, from the perspective of the committee and Metrolinx, safety is, I think, priority one. But I do understand from the customer's perspective, they don't want to think about that. They need, that's our job.
That's my
Make
point.
it a safe environment. And I think, there are many issues related to this as we kind of really take a macro lens on safety issues, which will constantly be around us, and particularly with population growth, the amount of construction that's going on, and the kind of current conditions, the capacity of certain stations to absorb the kind of things, the behavior that happens. But totally understand, but I think we are balancing all the time between the ends of the spectrum with a 360 review of these issues.
Yep.
But yes.
Sorry for the confusion.
Well, thank you.
I think it's really important.
It's an
I
important.
mean, it's a shift. People think design excellence is about looking good or being cool. It isn't. It's really about, this is a very big issue for our committee and as it relates to the traveler.
Yeah, and it's very good that it's been given the prominence in your committee to think about safety. Right? It's not what was historically just an audit risk issue. It is now a customer experience.
I would say conditions have changed radically and will continue to change. I think where safety kind of has really come up the ranks. And so
it's very good. Thank you very much, Marianne. Thank you, Greg. You can stay there if you want, Greg, because we're going right to the quarterly reports. There is a wealth of information in here. I work around here a lot, and when I read these, I still learn a heck of a lot more. So to all members of management, thank you very much for continuing to provide these reports on a quarterly basis. It's a great inventory of what's going on. Presto, I'm just going to see if there are any questions. Presto, we've already had a good discussion of Presto. Does anybody have anything more on Presto? Operations, we haven't had Greg hasn't spoken today. Is there anything, Greg, that you want to just emphasize or highlight in what you're up to?
I think Marianne picked up on a lot of the metrics that I think are very strong and staying strong and growing. On-time performance, ridership, and I think maybe to amplify the fact that we are adding new service while delivering on a massive infrastructure program, and that does punctuate issues of safety, and we are certainly aware of that, but I'd like to think that our safety stays strong while we're doing both. And that is the challenge, and that will be a growing challenge as we expand our infrastructure build. But the two of the good things for having some very good numbers for this reporting period. One is to buy the goodwill of our customers as we get ready for winter, because winter unfortunately is not that far away, and that challenges us on delivery. But the other is to create that goodwill opportunity to do this massive build. And we need to make sure that our baseline service level, which is growing, stays strong as we're building. Therein lies the challenge. But I think we've got some very good groundwork here that sets it up.
Anne?
I had a question.
Thank you, Greg.
I did have a question, Greg. Two questions. You know this new bus terminal that we're putting down on the waterfront?
Yes.
What happens to Dundas? Dundas bus terminal.
Oh, the existing one.
Yeah.
It's not ours, it's the city.
It's not ours, I know,
correct.
yeah, but it
That's
stays.
That's up to the city. Right now, that's under lease through the TTC to the intercity private sector bus companies. They have a contract that goes, I believe, to 2022, and they will transition into this facility. We are negotiating an agreement with them to enable that.
So
Because
the
that's
idea
part
is
of
that
a
it'll all be one big,
Subject to an agreement,
yeah.
we'll have the GO buses and the intercity buses in the new bus terminal. And from the city's perspective, that will free up a piece of real estate for redevelopment, sale, alternative use, whatever, but that's not our, it's not our land and not our say once, it's just the city's decision.
Right, but my real question has to do with what I see as the growing congestion along the lake shore. And just in the southern part of, of the city there. And I know that it's probably not ours, it's probably the city's decision to do an LRT along the lake shore. But have we thought, what's the transit going to be like along?
Leslie, can you come back to the table and tell Ann what you think the vision is?
Well, yes, the waterfront LRT, which in the big move extended from the along the waterfront, is a foundational piece. The current draft plan includes the waterfront LRT east and west, and in fact, both Mississauga and the City of Toronto have already begun planning, design, and engineering work around that. Which is why in the draft plan it's in the category of in development. So we see that as an important part of better connecting the region.
Do you think it's going to happen and in what time frame?
I think that's an open-ended question that's really, in many respects, dependent on where our plan sets and the commitments, the funding commitments to the project.
At present, there's no funding commitment from the city or the province?
Other than to advance the planning, design, and engineering.
Other than funding for design, so, when you look at the priority of the projects, and I have said this before, but, and I know that the extension of Yonge Street going north is, in the plan, and so is the relief line, but I tell you, this congestion, which backs everything up in the city, and especially now that we're building this new bus terminal, I just think I don't think people are going to be happy unless we can figure out a way to move them.
And Greg, can you comment on how much of a negative it is at present for the buses coming out of the existing terminal or the new terminal, getting onto the Gardiner either direction and up the DVP?
Sure. Both for intercity bus and for GO bus, which already serves a downtown bus terminal. But for GO, it makes it easier. We do have to reach a new level of sophistication to feed buses in and out of the new downtown bus terminal. And we will do that. It will require a staging property off-site, so it's a direct feed of buses in and out. And for intercity bus, they're looking forward to this. Assuming we negotiate an agreement that works for both, they don't have to drive through downtown Toronto anymore. They don't like to do that. That adds time into their service, and they're very competitive on their service profile.
So they don't want to have to get from downtown up to Dundas and back down again.
Oh, no, I'm in favor of this.
Yep,
I'm just saying about well, you know what it's like.
No, I'm just asking you, but are you concerned about the ability to get our buses moving either up the DVP or out the Gardiner and the QBW?
Well, I would encourage people to use GO Transit rail, so that reduces that. But for those GO buses that do go there, we manage around it. It is a congestion issue, and we have to manage around it. And we have as you know, the bus bypass shoulders on the DVP, for example, that is just for GO and emergency services, and that enables that to happen. And we have a skilled set of drivers that know how to use that effectively.
And has that made a difference to times?
A big difference, yeah. At times and consistency.
I wasn't so much thinking of our drivers. I was thinking of the whole impact.
I understand. But it is an issue of the intersection of our buses getting on.
Oh, yes. Yes. So it's good that our drivers are getting good at it, but I mean,
Are you prepared to rent on a daily basis any of your buses to directors who need to get up to DVP and rush hour on Friday?
In a word, no.
I'm real jealous when those buses go by me.
Anyway, that was the question that occurred to me when I read this report.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg. Planning and policy, I don't think it's reasonable to ask Leslie any more questions on planning. If you got questions, do it offline. She's done more than her share today. Capital projects, we heard from Peter. I assume people had a chance to ask Peter anything they had when he was up. Okay, that brings us to Judy Pfeiffer. Judy, where are you? Come on up. We haven't heard from you today.
It's okay.
How are you communicating? Everything all right?
It's all good.
Nothing you want to emphasize?
No.
Any questions for Judy? She won't come up here? Okay, and then Anita, where's Anita? Any you want to emphasize, Anita? Anybody got any questions for Anita? Mary Ann does, so you better come up, Anita.
I don't, it was a general question.
Go ahead.
Whether these reports, these quarterly reports are available to the public on the
Yes.
website. I think that there's just a huge amount of information in here for people who feel detached from what the work of this board and the committees. I think there's a lot in here, as you say, that we get done, so.
It's a stunning amount of information, and I know management puts a lot of work into writing them.
Yes,
And I know we give them short shrift at the end of the meetings.
Huge.
But you can't do the job of being a director here without reading through these and knowing what the movie looks like, so that the specific issues that we're dealing with on any given meeting, and I urge people who follow Metrolinx to do the same, because if you read all these reports, you really do have a good sense of what's going on in the organization. Unless any director has any matter they wish to raise, I'm going to say thank you to everybody who attended today. We appreciate your attendance, and we will call the meeting to an end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.